Hello, everybody. Greetings. It is Tuesday, June 26th, 2018. This is your Cup of Jones. This will mostly be your Cup of Jones, at least for the next, 20 minutes, as I have my breakfast. Good morning, everybody. Last night was a late night, but it was very exciting, because last night we had our big meeting for the month of July, planning out when our shoots are going to be, what our streams are going to be, who's going to be reviewing what, if there's any concerns we need to talk about. And of course, there was a big concern that we all need to talk about, which is that since the last official Cup of Jones, recently, I did a very special Cup of Jones that we put up on YouTube that you can go check out, where I was just like, hey, whoa, 50K, that happened. But this is an official Cup of Jones. This is going to be your classic 2.5 hour Cup of Jones. And so we need to talk about that studio goal. Right now, we are sitting at 7,540 patrons, and we are currently making $52,592 a month. So cheers. There's lots to talk about, especially the fact that, of course, we need to wait until July 1st through the 5th to figure out what that's going to drop to, because it always drops to something on July 1st, and then what that ends up being on July 5th, which then is the official, around the 5th or the 6th, is the official benchmark of, what capital we have and what we can do moving forward. But there is a very real chance that we will be above 50K for the month of July. So let's talk about it. I'm going to do this episode a little bit backwards. I'm going to consider the studio chat our editorial for the week. So I'm going to do that first. Let's talk a little bit about just stuff that's going on right now, and then I will specifically deep dive into studio. Good morning, everybody. 52615. I'm sorry. I wrote that number down last night. Apparently we're at 52615. Thank you for the update. Hall of Greats is tonight. And then we'll get to personal questions later if there's time. If we're at 12:20 and I haven't done personal questions, I might push those off until next week. We'll just have a big cozy personal episode next week. We're doing Hall of Greats tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific time, twitch.tv/EasyAllies. Come join us if you would like to see us debate what are the greatest games of all time for our Hall of Greats that we do every 3 or 4 months. Thank you for comments on the latest special episode. Like I said, I also put that up on Patreon. I believe it's called 50K and Beyond. So you can go and get a quick update from me. Thank you for lots of warm messages. There's lots of nice messages here on the last episode of Cup of Jones that we're excited about us hitting our studio goal. But I will not be taking questions from the last Cup of Jones. I should maybe have specified that in the text. But just know that when we do Cup of Jones on a Tuesday, or I do my weekly episode of Cup of Jones, that is always where the questions and comments and stuff like that come from. So when I put up the audio version, I don't take questions or comments from that when we do special episodes like that. So, but a lot of it was just wonderful sentiment. A lot of people were very excited. Is the sound slightly out of sync with the video? Oh dear. I checked before we went live. It shouldn't be. Yeah, everything looks okay. Let me check the camera just to be safe. Yeah, no delay. That's what it should be set at. Hall of Greats is tonight. I talked about having a big meeting last night. We can get more into details about that. But, so let's talk about here. I can maybe even do the official editorial jump. Here we go. Boom. So, we hit 50K on the studio. We definitely hit that sooner than I think any of the other allies were expecting to. It's kind of been remarkable. We normally see, the June-July bump. Through our 2.5, a little over 2 years of operation, we have definitely seen, the roller coaster ride of Easy Allies. We go up for, we rise to the occasion every summer, and that's the same thing that's basically happening now. We're seeing the post E3 excitement, the build, and then there's an inevitable drop come the end of Q4. And so not only expecting things to plateau a little bit, it's just interesting, how sharp of a rise it is. We really have had a couple crazy months ever since, things were looking a little interesting at the beginning of May, and we needed to change things up and communicate with our audience changes that were going to be happening. And not only did that have a positive effect that seemed to really light a fire under this Patreon, leading to us acquiring new equipment, leading into our E3 coverage, and then now, as we look for the rest of the summer, potentially opening us up to getting a studio. The thing, and actually somebody just mentioned, Baptiste Charlotte in chat just specifically mentioned one of the people who's directly responsible for that bump, which is Thrill House, one of our new mega sponsors that you'll be hearing from on our episodes of the Easy Allies podcast in July. I wouldn't necessarily call it an issue, but the concern that we have, that we want to play things very safe moving forward, is that the bump that you're seeing right now is effectively demonstrated by our wonderful 7,500 plus patrons, but specifically by a couple of people that are really pushing us up over that 50K limit. And so obviously that's something that we want to make sure is sustained going into the month of July, but we also want to make sure is around in the months and months and months and months moving forward, because we are going to be taking that money and then pursuing a studio and then paying rent on that studio. And so we want to make sure that if we are going to have an inevitable dip coming up into Q3 and Q4 of this year, as we do every year, and that's fine. You know, that's we, despite our best efforts, it's definitely an ongoing challenge to plateau this Patreon and get it to a point that we are, you know, constantly on an upward tick. I think we're just always going to experience ups and downs. But the thing is, every single time you see one of those ups, it settles at a point that was higher than before. And so that's why we're always excited, more excited, I think, in the long run, seeing that patron number go up than seeing the Patreon number go up. And so we're excited when new people come in, even if that is just for $1, $5, or $10, to be a part of this community and to support Easy Allies. As much as we are excited for the big fish who come in and really make that needle move in an exciting way. We've definitely seen, you know, not only that number go up because of Thrill House's involvement and because of other people donating past the tiers that they are officially at, actually, but having that incentivize, having that reinvigorate people that potentially want to donate more to see that studio happen. I just want to communicate to patrons, and I want to make sure everybody realizes that the number one thing that we want to encourage here at Easy Allies financially is a good, sound, comfortable base. We want all of you to be 120% comfortable with the amount of money that you are donating here at Easy Allies, that you are giving to this cause. We want it to be something that you can be very cozy with, that you're not necessarily stressed out month to month. You may be down the road. We hear a lot from people that are like, I don't donate now, or I donate at a level that is smaller than what I want to, and I aspire to, you know, donate at a higher level. There's very few things there's very few things that, I'm sorry, I was reading chat, that get us excited more than that. Just, you know, people saying that, there's few nicer things that you can hear from somebody that they, love the work that you do and they want to donate more than they can. And so I don't want people to donate more than they can. I don't want people to have kind of ridden this wave of this excitement going into the studio. And I'm sorry to start this off with like kind of a bummer talk. This is a you know, so-called financial meeting, an investors meeting that we have here because you are our direct patrons, and why I know, you know, all 7,600 of you are not all showing up at the same time to watch Cup of Jones. This is hopefully a message that will be passed on directly to our patrons, and then hopefully can then be passed on to the rest of our wonderful community on Twitch and social media and YouTube. We just want everyone to be cozy, and we don't want, as much as we are nervous about the big step moving on up to a new studio, we want to quell those nerves, and we want to be confident and be truly excited about this move moving forward. We want our community to be the same as well, so we don't want any patrons out there being like, okay, you know, like we can't, this is not sustainable for now, but hey, everybody's jumping in, so this is really exciting. I want to jump in too. But it is really exciting, so I'm going to spend the rest of this editorial talking about why it is so exciting. I had plans. We have so many things that we need to do promo-wise. We have so many things. We need to replace our video on YouTube. which takes a while because you got to make sure that you get the right footage from everybody. We've made big changes to the studio, and so we were waiting on fresh episodes of every single show before we start clipping shows out for promos, so we're not selling, you know, one looking garage and then you show up later and all of a sudden the cameras are better and the background is gray. And it seems like so many things are changing in real time that we're like, hey, it's time to make a new studio promo, and then boom, we hit the studio goal. And so we have some people that said that they want me to make the studio video as well, for many reasons. One, to get people excited about the move that is potentially inevitably going to happen anyway. Or if, say, we should drop to 49,000, unfortunately, in July, or that is something sustainable where, like, we hit that in July, but then don't hit it in August, then maybe a studio goal would help to help people understand and be incentivized to donate more or to support us to reach that specific goal. But I just absolutely feel compelled because we have hit that goal and because it is such an exciting conversation happening in our community right now that I want to add to it. And I want to let you know a quick list of 9 things that I jotted down when sitting in this room and looking around and realizing how different that space would be. Because you're going to be hearing a lot more from us if we actually hit that goal on what you can expect to change from Easy Allies. We had a huge conversation about last night, and we have more people asking specific business questions about stuff like this. Can we expect new shows? How will this change your streaming schedule? How will this change your shooting schedule? And while we can theorize about those things and dream about those things, we still don't know until we all physically get our 9 bodies into that space, until we Blood is taking care of business in the chat, and I missed the question that he's addressing. But what the space is like. You know, we have ideas for what we want out of a space, and I will try to describe that, but we're not exactly sure what that will be like until we get there. You know, and so I think once we get into that space, then we can start guaranteeing things. And one of the things that I think might be frustrating moving forward is we've passed the 50K goal, and we do not have goals past 50K. And so we want those goals to be something, obviously, that is reflective of the new studio. I think it would not behoove us. I think it would be disingenuous to our community to set up a goal as something that we're producing here in the studio, and then here in this studio, in the garage studio, and then move on to a new space, and then not be able to do that or have that change, or, you know, worst case scenario, have to stop doing that for a couple weeks during the process of actually moving to the studio. So for that reason, I would not expect from us any big updates on the goal front on Patreon, probably for another month. So it'll probably won't be until August or potentially late July until we really have time to assess what those goals are going to be. And I know that sounds frustrating, but you have to understand, we take goals very seriously here at Easy Allies, and we want a goal to be something that not only have we all agreed on, but it's not something that we have agreed on after some exhaustive meeting, or after we think maybe everybody chimed in on Slack, or we kind of rush in a conversation before or after we are all gathering to shoot something else. Every now and then we gather and we specifically have a meeting for the purposes of figuring something out. Last night was the beginning of that conversation. Some things were introduced that we were excited about, and we will continue to have that conversation before we get really comfortable with the fact that all 9 of us know that we can meet that somebody who isn't directly involved in it isn't concerned because they're like, I didn't get an update on this, I'm not sure what's going on, or that we're relying on 1 or 2 people that are maybe already have too many responsibilities. They're gonna have to carry the load of a new show or a new tier, something that we are promising our patrons. We don't like to promise something and then not deliver on it, and so if we are going to be making big changes moving into a studio, we want to make sure that they are reflective of something that that makes sense. More Don, please. Sure. Help us out, Hogue. Excellent suggestions. All of these things will be added to the list. We want to talk more about studio specifics, studio goals, studio dreams, so yeah. And not only is August probably the first time you're going to hear about potential new goals from Easy Allies, but if we hit the 50K goal and we maintain that for July, obviously we're going to be looking at August. We're going to be looking at what potential growth that we have in the month of July. It's going to be a busy month. I'm going to Comic-Con. We also have another fun event that we have not announced yet that we'll be doing in July that we're very excited about. But a move most likely won't happen until probably September, because a lot of us have vacations planned, and a lot of us basically are going to have to go case by case and look at places and get cozy with them, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, we find a place that we want to move in July, and then if that is the case, then I don't know how much you all have moved before, but moving is very difficult, and setting up this space, took us 2 years, and so we expect it'll probably take at least a month to conceptualize the new studio, to figure out financially what we're going to need on top of that. So one of the big questions that I'll answer ahead of time that we do have comments for specifically was, are you going to plan something when you move in? And of course we are. We'll definitely have a big moving in party. But there are financial concerns for equipment regarding the studio itself. So we have new equipment, which is great. All of that is helping directly in production of shows that we do at Easy Allies. But for example, all of the lights that you see here at Easy Allies are hooked up on a grid that just happens to be naturally built into my garage. There are big wooden beams that go across, and so we can hook everything onto that. Most likely, if we were to get a studio space, it will not have those beams. And so those will either need to be set up on poles or, directly installed into the walls. So that's going to be, of course, the big question when we, check out all these spaces. How's the internet? Do you have air conditioning? What's the parking like? And how much can we build in here? We're definitely need to be setting stuff up for equipment, and the space will need to make sense. We'll need to make sure it sounds good. We'll need to do various tests. And so that is something that we want to do and exist here at the same time. And so we want to be able to make sure we have enough money saved. We want to make sure that we're communicating with everybody, that we're not rushing into this. And so I know it can be frustrating as a patron, especially as a new patron, as somebody who upped their pledge to trying to make this happen, to not see all of us rush into this in a week, to not see by, like July 7th, we're in a new studio, we have new shows. Like, this is going to take time because it just absolutely has to. The patronage that we're getting right now, the support that we're getting right now is substantial, is very serious, is very important to us, and we believe should be met with the same amount of seriousness when it comes to planning these things. It took, I think, about 3 or 4 weeks to set up all the equipment and get all of that comfortable before we knew what we were doing, basically, with all of the new stuff that we got before E3, and that was just getting equipment. Don't get a space that doesn't allow Sophie. Yes, of course. That's a very important question from chat. But what is that going to mean? If that took us that long to run tests and to figure everything out, and that was moving equipment into a space that we already occupied, and we're going to be moving all of our equipment into a brand new space, then we want to make sure that that everything works, that everything's set up, that we're comfortable, and that most importantly, we can deliver promises. We can make promises that we know we can deliver. So I want to address that specifically because I know there's a lot of people, and for our lovely patrons, for people who have the unfortunate job and carry the burden of communicating a lot of this to our audience, because it doesn't matter what we tweet, doesn't matter what we post on Patreon for everybody to see, or what we include in our live streams or videos on YouTube. Somebody's going to miss it. Somebody's going to come in, at the midpoint in July and say, hey, they hit that studio goal. Why are they not in a studio yet? And so we wanted to make sure that we communicate that. I said as much in the 50K video and beyond. I will say as much again now. We will say it every single time we can on social media and when we live stream, that you can expect more updates, but we just want to make sure we want to make the right decisions. And while we definitely have opinions and have been doing research, getting a studio for ourselves and moving all our stuff in there is unprecedented, as it should be, because it's very exciting. But when something is unprecedented, you want to take your time to do it right. So, but let's talk about the studio specifically. I want to talk about what that means for Easy Allies. That goes beyond just having a new space and all, us meeting there potentially more frequently and having fun doing that. And this especially comes from somebody who lives in the place where a lot of this stuff has been produced. You're never going to see me drink a smoothie again on the stream, that's for sure. Because I'm going to make my smoothie and then take that in the car on the way to work. And then I will finish that on the drive. But hi, I'm Brandon Jones. This is my house. For those of you who don't know, or maybe don't think about it that often, I live here. This is a garage in the back of my house that we shoot all the Easy Ally stuff in. That remarkably has a really strong power grid that has gotten us to the point where we are now. It'll be hilarious if we check out new places and they potentially don't have as many breakers or a strong enough power setup as we do here in my garage. I don't know what we did to deserve it. They were renting this space out for a while when we picked up the house, and so this space was ready to support a human being. We used to have a working sink in here. We removed that for the booth. I now have a working booth, and we got a bathroom. It is livable. As hopefully our new studio will be as well. But there are some unfortunate realities that come from shooting stuff in here. Number one, we're very close to the outdoors. So there are two entrances to this garage. There's this the big barn doors here on the left that some of you you see pretty much in the in every single wide video that we shoot. We're a little close now, so you just kind of get the close up with the tchotchkes in the back. But there's a gigantic door that scrapes on the concrete when you open it. That has a latch that is right behind Kyle when you get his close up on the Easy Allies podcast. Just a big old door. There is like little to no insulation on that door, which we'll get to in a second. And then we have a more secure door, the door that Sophie loves to peek through, which she doesn't realize that this door is open. And that is our glass door in the back that you can see behind Ian or Damiani when we do live streams or shoot the podcast. And those are the two main entrances. One of the things that's nice, we don't have air conditioning. We'll get to that in a second. When I open up that back door and turn on the fan, there's a nice cool ocean breeze that comes through. But we are very close to the elements. Our mixer gets very dusty. If you were to do a production studio, you would not want to essentially be camping as we are. You would not want to have a door within feet of expensive equipment that you purchased that just leads directly into the outdoors. We have squirrels that run around this neighborhood. We have, mice. We have rats. There's all sorts of fun things that like to run around this neighborhood our PC is right there, our new mixer, all the consoles. It's just everything. We have to dust in here quite frequently, and I'm willing to do that. There are many, fun, eccentric things we've had to do to make Easy Allies work in this space. But if you were going to set up your own home studio, it's not the smartest thing to do to have your equipment that close to the only door leading to the space where you are shooting something. The step one. Point number two, as I mentioned before, the garage is very poor insulation. A lot of people were like, you should get air conditioning. Just get like an air conditioning unit. That is near impossible. Man and I have tried to do that in the past. Because, like I said, there's very poor insulation. There is a setup you can do to put cold air into this room, but it goes right out. And so even if we stay in here for a long time, once we get into, like, case in point, today is a very warm day in Southern California, and we are getting into the warm summer months. It is always a little bit warm here in California, but we are especially getting into the warm period of the year, and as was the case yesterday when we shot a bunch of tabletop episodes, we usually just keep the door open, which leads to hearing the kids next door, hearing a fire truck driving down the street, hearing a plane as it flies overhead, and so it'd be nice to have some air conditioning. It'd be nice to budget that out and have the place be cool and quiet and have a more controlled environment, because it's just the insulation in this place is like remodel level. Like, it's just not something that we could do handyman style. It's not something we can just, break out a bunch of foam and hammer away. Like, we'd really have to, take those doors out, put in new doors, potentially put a new roof on this thing. I mean, would that have to be a lot of work to actually make this place sealed, to make it soundproof also. And so that's something where you have to wonder, is that worth the effort to put into this space when this space was not initially designed to handle the challenges that we are throwing at it? Or is that something that we want to wait to get a studio? So I very much look forward to that. That is when we'll have all the questions and concerns and fears about how many steps it'll take to move into a studio from the Allies. I like to remind them 2 words: air conditioning. Number 3, there is, we talked about soundproofing, but The doors and the walls are kind of weak. The ceiling is also super high up. There's no reason to have a ceiling that tall unless you need that for a lighting grid or whatever. But it's a big ceiling. And so just something you'd have in a house, but you wouldn't have in a studio. Number 4, where we shoot. So as we have evolved Easy Allies, we migrated. It made sense because the TV was set up in that corner. There's also a door on that side, which was used when this building was rented out, but there's no reason for us to use that right now because it's on like the side of the house that has a gate like a foot away from it. So there's a door on that side. It's not necessarily that photogenic. Of course, there's a door behind me that Lightning is guarding with her life. But we've kind of settled into this corner here. The corner is nice because it has a little bit of visual interest. There is kind of like a center point, which I like try to balance my head on whenever I do Cup of Jones. And you have Lightning, and you have this shelving unit meeting at a point that does create a little bit of visual interest, but this is kind of like the best it's going to get. Like we really took a long look at all of the different corners. Obviously we don't want to shoot by the bathroom, and all the spaces that we could potentially shoot. And I am telling you, I know for a fact after 2 years of operating Easy Allies, we are at maximum capacity when it comes to what we can fit into this space, how much we can do with the limited space that we have. And so being, thank you everybody. This is kind of potentially a boring conversation because this might be a lot of stuff that you already heard. So our wonderful chat is talking about all sorts of fun things that have nothing to do with the points that I'm making. But this setup is not ideal. As I mentioned before, we don't use that door, but it would be wonderful if we did because it would be on the other side of the camera. So you basically don't want to have a setup where people have to walk in front of the camera. Like the ideal setup would be that the camera that I'm looking at you through would have a television underneath it because of we need that for reactions and stuff like that. It helps right now because I can set up XSplit and see the camera angle, and when I'm moving the camera and set everything up in here, I can see how it looks. But with the inability to walk from this side of our stage that way and go behind the camera there to some behind space is unfortunate. Basically means we either have to like go out that door, and in a lot of cases you can see that door when it is open if we do a wide shot, and have to walk all the way around. Mr. Damiani or Ian Hank or anybody who is managing the PC or is at our station with the mixers and the switcher and everything, then is next to that door, which opens on them, and that was a tight squeeze when we wanted to keep the fan as close to that door as possible to keep things as cool as possible during E3, and when you had to come in, it was just like it was a real delicate procedure. And so you want to have a little bit more space in a room, but not only more space, like if we had the same amount of space in this room, but this wasn't like a door that you gained like sole access to this space, but it was just a wall and we could just shoot against this wall and then have that be the main entrance and then just come around that direction. That's the way you should do it. That's the way a studio should be set up. That's gonna be the space that we're looking for, someplace that similar to your GT Live, GT Time setups and yes, those are the two shows, GT Live and GT Time. We would have the camera and you would be able to, granted if you had side cams, you could still potentially walk in front of those, but have a big enough space that you could go and walk behind the camera. And that's also number 5. Yeah, people have to walk in front of the camera to get anywhere. It's difficult to get to the back of to everything. Basically, the way that we have our camera and our TV and our consoles and the PC and the switcher and the mixer and everything like that is they are now sandwiched together. So on one side, you have the camera and the television. You have all of our consoles underneath that. You have our HDMI switcher, which switches between the PC and all of our consoles. And then on the other side, you got your PC, your camera looking at the person that's on the PC, the light over there, and they're just like right next to each other. So like if you're getting behind the PC, you're by the consoles. If you're getting at the consoles, you're right next to the PC. And you really want those spaces to be completely open. You want to have space behind that so people can walk up. So say we are doing a marathon stream or we are doing a group stream where we are switching consoles. It's not something where you will see the top of somebody's head because they're right by the camera, because they are doing that in front of this space. They would be able to do that behind that space, and the people in the camera would never be the wiser because we have the, not only the space, but being able to shoot at a specific angle in the room, in the space that you are in, so that we have more access. And potentially not having the PC there. Like, one thing that's been great, is having, making this cozy little corner where we can have Damiani chime in when we're streaming, or we can have Ian chime in when we are shooting the podcast, and have their own little space. But we can't see them because there's a giant TV over there. And so a lot of times when somebody's talking, when Damiani's talking, we're all like, what? Yeah, because we have to lean over and see what they're saying. And so having that space there, just having space in general in that corner, I think will not only be very helpful when we move into a studio, but is the way a studio should operate. Yeah, somebody who's familiar with Blood's Head, Eric Grinberg says, I'm familiar with the seeing Blood's Head on the streams. One that we've talked about too that is dangerous to bring up now, because we don't want to make promises about a space that we don't own. We don't want to talk about things that could potentially take a while, or there could be a whole nother fun amount of logistics. But we want to have guests. We want to invite more people over here. We've invited people on occasion, definitely more of the colleague variety than the celebrity variety. We were lucky to have Mr. Cory Barlog come in and do a spoiler mode with us for God of War, and of course Game Explain. Ben Hansen from Game Informer came over, and we've had people on the stage, of course, like Elise Willem, Ashley Birch. Ian loves having fun people on Reaction Shots and Fiasconauts that are just friends of ours that we feel comfortable being like, yeah, I'll just have them come over to Jones's, and they'll know where Jones lives now, and that's fine. But it would be very fun. Again, not making promises. You just, await more information on how and when and if this stuff could potentially roll out. But if you are unfamiliar, I did a show called GT Live back at Game Trailers. That was a very interesting challenge for me because I had never booked guests before. And so that was its own kind of fun form of nerve-wracking yourself. Just wondering, like, hey, if that person just doesn't show up, I don't know what I'm going to do. And it was always really interesting seeing Jeremy Hoffman, who now works marketing Fortnite and other stuff at Epic Games, when we used to do GTTV, seeing him juggle all of that stuff and have guests and backup guests and backup guests. And so we want to get back into that racket. We want to get back in and have a space. One goal of mine that I don't know if we could meet financially, but it would be nice to be somewhat close to downtown Los Angeles, somewhat close to the convention center, so that, but also close to potentially the airports that are here in Los Angeles, kind of like equidistant to those things, so that if we have people coming into town, if we have people that typically go to events like, on Wilshire in, that part of LA, on Sunset or something around there, like around where EA Play was at E3 this year, if you guys came out, so that we are accessible to people. We are in a spot that is easy to get to, that we are guest friendly, and that we can produce more content that welcomes guests in. Number 8. Which is maybe potentially the best one. And I think this is the thing that I was very happy because I put my foot down and was adamant about this last night when we talked about amongst the allies various details that we look forward to in a studio and ways that we think that can improve our content. And there is just one major thing to me that stands in the way of us actually being a working production studio and just kind of is this the first Easy Allies top 10? No, we only got 9, so it's the top 9. That was an idea that I had actually through the group. I was like, hey, what if we're cheeky and we do top 9s? And everyone immediately was like, no, Jones. Anyway, what's the next topic? I wasn't necessarily in love with that idea, but I thought, it was worth throwing out. I don't know if you know about this desk that I'm on right now, but this desk is a fun little transformer desk. It has legs that screw in, and when those legs aren't screwed in, the part that I'm on right now folds underneath so that we can tuck that back in the corner so we can then bring in our couch. We have a distinct, and I think this will be the same moving forward, we have a distinct desk versus couch setup at Easy Allies. Obviously, some of those things work for different things, like Hall of Greats works, and group screams as well. In general, when we are gathered together and playing games and having a fun time, you have your A-team, your people people up front who are playing the game, who are directly engaging in chat, opening presents, you know, reading chat, answering questions, playing video games. And then you have your B team, which is in the back, which is, you know, as weeks go by, getting better and better at not creating their own separate conversation and confusing everybody that's trying to listen to things that are being said by everybody on the group stream, but supporting that other group, maybe quietly sipping their drinks or eating their food in the back. And then that really works for group streams. You will see that setup tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific time when we gather for our Tuesday night group stream and do another installment of the Hall of Greats. The trick is, immediately when we need to swap to another show, we break the desk out, and we have to set that up, and we set up mics, which means all sorts of stuff. It means the mics have to move. It means the desk has to move. We've had some comments before here on Cup of Jones, so they're like, I'm going to pull my hair out, man. Why does the podcast look slightly different every single time you shoot it? Like, why is the desk sometimes not perfectly line up at the bottom of the frame? Why are the corners that I see on either side of the frame not identical every single time? And that's because we change lots of stuff here. Like, we just recently shot some fun green screen stuff. For what? I don't know. And we now have a green screen, you know, that we have to bring in, and then we have to move everything out. We got to move the desk out and the couch out, and make space for that. We're moving mics around, we're tweaking lights, and it has been exciting, I got to admit. Like, it does feel like an achievement every single time we are able to change things out, to upgrade what we do here at Easy Allies, and specifically what we do here in this space. It does feel nice to pat ourselves in the back for being like, we're very creative with how we manage the use of this space. But it is time to stop being creative in that way. It is time to lock down the desk. Hashtag lock down the desk. It's time to build a desk that exists the way it did back in our Shenmue reaction, GT time, GT live days, that does not move, that is built on a level so that, again, the roof here is very small. You know, there's not a lot of room up there that we have to move the camera up, and so it would be nice to have a little bit more height, just so that to this space, potentially build a stage that the desk could sit on, that we could all be raised on, and then be sitting in stools like we were before, so that if somebody wants to and they come up, so like right now, you know, I can just stand up and I'd be out of frame, but it'd be nice if people could come in and be standing, and then, you know, the desk would still be at the same level that it is right now. That was the setup that we had before. It was really great. I really like, I don't know if you remember the fun No Man's Sky debate that I had with Ben Moore back in the day, but we had that near the end of our E3 coverage. We were all pretty loopy, as I'm sure you saw a couple weeks ago when we did our E3 2018 coverage, and we were standing during that, and that was really fun, actually, to be standing at that desk, and have that still be viable, that we didn't necessarily need to sit down. I think it was Huber that suggested that. He's like, all right, we're standing. It's getting near the end of E3. And so specifically locking down a show environment, something that we can maybe have a little bit more flexibility, kind of designed from the ground up, knowing that we might want to change the aesthetic of the backgrounds, maybe the frames that are in the back, maybe the objects that are in the back on a shelf, moving from show to show, so that shows do have their own distinct identity. It's something right now that we have just kind of given ourselves a pass on because of the limitations of the space. Even if we were wanting to, say, change out decorations, if we were to change from show to show, where would those decorations go? Like, there's just so little space that we have now. We really have maximized capacity here. And so very much looking forward to locking down a streaming space and locking down a shooting shows space, so that we can potentially, if things aren't too loud, shoot a show and a stream at the same time. Which would be very fun, and potentially shoot both. So have live events, have an E3 coverage, maximize both of those spaces so that we can have a camera that is in a streaming space, we can have a camera that is in our desk, like office-looking studio space, and then have a camera on the switcher and in that production space, and be bouncing around between all of those. I think that would be a very fun live studio environment. And number 9, finally, and this one is just extremely personal, just to yours truly, and that is, this is my house, so we can't do this forever. We can't do this forever for a lot of reasons. You know, I'm gonna be 40 in January. I will be getting old, and I I'm also, you know, a person who owns the property that this, well, hopefully one day I'll own it, but the property that this garage is on. So if I somehow get out of the mix, which I don't have any plans to, but, you know, accidents happen, horrible things happen. So if I was suddenly not able to support Easy Allies because I was incapacitated in whatever ways your imagination can come up with, Easy Allies would be in a pickle. They'd be forced to get a studio right away. And so, yeah, Jones wants the kids off his lawn. It's just not realistic to do it in a space. I think anybody that has a home studio knows that, unless they are a solo operating unit. Unless, you know, if I was running this thing out of my garage and it was just me, and it was just me streaming stuff and just me producing content, and it wasn't Easy Allies, it was the Brandon Jones hour all the time, then I wouldn't, you know, feel so bad, because I'd be like, hey, it's just me, so I can move this show wherever I am, and that's what the show becomes, because everybody knows I'm going to do it in my space, because it is my show, and everything's just me. But it is not. I have 8 other gentlemen that come over here, and those 8 gentlemen deserve a studio. They deserve a home. They deserve to not have those weird feelings of like, oh, I'm in Jones's space. Like, it's nice to gather and to feel a kinship and to kind of rekindle, you know, the feeling of the good old days back at GT. But it's just not something we can sustain forever for lots of reasons. And so it's exciting not only to potentially make that move in 2018, but it is something that we're going to have to do sooner or later. And so, again, that's, you know, at the end of the list, it is not a gigantic concern. I'm very, very lucky to have the job I have, and I'm very, very happy to continue this if necessary. And that's something that I want to pass along. If you know, we drop to like just above 50K in July, and then that maybe freaks some people out, and so they abandon their pledges, and then we drop below 50K in August, and but again, maintain around 48, 49K, which needs to be stated is remarkable and an achievement and growth for Easy Allies on its own. Like, you know, we were all just kind of beside ourselves when we kept seeing that number tick up, because it was just like, what's going on? Like, we're not, you know, we did E3, but we're not necessarily, you know, doing anything right now. We're not having a drive. We're not having any specific social messaging that says, we're desperate, we need to get a studio right now, let's make this happen. Now is the time. It was just kind of our community that jumped in, and of course, thanks to a couple very generous people among our patronage that decided it was time. And so hopefully we can maintain that. That is the goal. That is what we want to happen. And that is my editorial on that. Let's change up the jazz. Let me take another sip, just so I can see the waveform, pause for a little bit, and know that this is where I need to put the time code for business questions. Candy Coated Thorns, I hope they aren't busting themselves for it. We're always busting ourselves. Yeah. You have that cup? Yeah, this is the PlayStation E3 Experience 2016. The fun of the movies. The excitement of E3. So, I love that. We got a big stack of those. I have my smoothie. It's, I don't know what it is. The amount that I blend in my smoothie maker is just perfect. It goes to the brim every single day. So, we got this from a fan on the back. I was there. I don't remember specifically who sent us those cups. Thank you very much. This is as much the cup of Jones as this is. Feedback, business. Professor Metal Gear, how do you plan to inaugurate the studio once you finalize the location and move in? Given that this will be the first studio you have rented independent of Viacom or Defy, correct me if I'm wrong, you are not. I'm wondering if you do something special to commemorate it. Of course. We will definitely do something special. As of right now, again, we have a couple of events to cover. Easy Livin' is going to happen before we make that move, and so we are focused on those events, but there are many reasons to do, you know, we had our better equipment before E3. There are many reasons to do another fundraiser when we move into the studio to say, hey, it'd be nice to have a little extra capital to support us if we need to put some money away for rent. Obviously, there are just, that first month's rent, getting internet set up, getting potentially technicians to come in and work on things. We have to pay them. And I mentioned getting a new desk, getting things for the lights, getting lights for a second space. Right now we have enough lights for one space that we use for two things. We will need new lights to set up. We can, will, and have already started budgeting for that. So we are putting money away because until we have to pay that first month's rent, if we do hit 52K, 51K, 50K moving forward, that'll be a little extra money in our pocket for the months of July and August, and we intend to save that and then put that into production of the studio. But obviously a little financial help would not hurt in that regard. We leave that up to the discretion of every single one of our lovely supporters to decide, nah, I gave you money in May, I'm not giving you money anymore. Totally viable. But yeah, we'll have a big blowout party. We'll make a big thing of it. But I just can't give you details because, boy, is that far off. And it's hard to say what that's going to be if we don't even know what space we're going to be in when we do it. Jen Cruz, is a daily news show a la Kinda Funny Games Daily in the cards? I would at least double my pledge if that was a goal. We talked about a daily show. Daily show is very exciting. Especially with the studio. It's fun to... I will say one of the things that we did talk about that I'm going to mention extremely vaguely because there's all sorts of different fun ways that we could do that. But I'm very attracted to the idea of having more reasons to show up on twitch.tv/EasyAllies, having more things that we do on a more regular schedule that you can expect. And that is one thing that we did discuss, is kind of like, a shifting that could take place between some of the shows that we do, because a lot of our shows are just us sitting and talking, and a lot of our streams are the same. And so, could shows become streams? Could streams become shows? Could we do those at a more, could we blend some things? And so, one of those topics that did come up that we are very, very far from deciding specifically what form that could take if we decide to do it. But that would be something that you could count on that would be at the same time period. I don't know if that would be a morning show. Would probably not be news related. Because why would you do that? Kinda Funny does it better than anybody. But would be something that, that's that Easy Allies Daily Show. That's something that I can tune in. Whether that would have the same hosts, whether that would have different hosts, I don't know. We're still figuring that out. Don't quote me on any of this. But I would say it's in the cards in the sense of being discussed. It's something that many of the allies want. It's something that I think would benefit us, would benefit our Twitch channel, would benefit... I think anything more you can put on the clock that you can expect to happen at a specific time, and something that would certainly celebrate our new studio. It's worth saying, though, that Kinda Funny Games Daily is the bomb. That whatever we did, it would certainly not be at the same time as that. It would not be news related in the sense of us like going through the headlines that they do to get you caught up in everything that happens during the day. There are some hardcore fans at Easy Allies of Kinda Funny Games Daily. We really love what they produce on that show. I think it's really been incredible for them. I think it's really kind of one of their big tentpole pieces of content now. And like so many things that Kinda Funny does, I want to learn from it and emulate it, but not do it at all, because they're amazing at what they do. And so, a daily news show a la Kinda Funny Games Daily is not in the cards. A daily show has been discussed. I will say that much. Elliot Carlson, any chance you guys will be on Giant Bomb's night show? Have they approached you about that? No. Assuming you mean their show that they produced during E3. Giant Bomb's tricky. Giant, they're not only Giant Bomb, but like Paximania, and that crew, every time they get together, they have so much fun, and I love them. Jeff Gerstmann's one of my favorite people in the world. Honestly, of all the, I know I've said this before, but like, of all of the people that I've met in this industry, I think he is one of the wisest, and definitely has some really, really crazy stories to tell because he's been doing this for a very long time. But just really fun to follow that crew. I think they are so unique in their construction and how they cover things. And it's the kind of thing that feels gross to just kind of like knock on their door. Hello, Giant Bomb. Excuse me. Hi, we'd like to be a part of your stuff. I think that would be great. I definitely have friends that are a part of that of the social group that that does appear on those nightly shows. And it's just the kind of thing that I think I would want to have happen organically. I think obviously a lot of the people that do stuff with them are San Francisco based, and so a lot of that is people coming down from out of town coming into Los Angeles, and we are based in Los Angeles, and so we tend to also work with people that are also in LA. Long story short, I'd love to be on their night show, but no, we have not been approached. Brandon K. Gann, at the end of E3, I read a GameSpot article citing that E3 2019 would be the last confirmed E3 for the LA Convention Center. Oh, no. And if the center couldn't modernize, the ESA would have to relocate. They've said that before, and then they were like, we'll sign on for a couple more years. But it has been a concern of theirs for a long time. I understand this is a situation that is not certain, and E3 could very well stay where it has been. Plus, this is 2 years off of where it were to come about. But in the event E3 is not where it has been for the last decade, what would be EZA's plan? Is there another location in LA E3 could be? Not really. There's the Anaheim Convention Center where they do D23 and where BlizzCon will be, but that is not E3 ready, I don't think. Boy, having E3 by Disneyland? I know, it sounds like a dream, but like, there's just not a lot of space. If not, where do you think it would go? And finally, are there too many variables to consider in formulating a rough contingency right now? There's not that many variables. I mean, we would just have to move everything. It would cost a lot more. It would mean that one thing that we talked about that we do not have a specific confirmation right now, just because if we are moving into a studio, we really need to financially assess the next couple of months. And that's whether or not we're going to PAX. We went to PAX last year. We had a panel. We sent Ian Hink, myself, and Kyle Bossman, and we did a Hello, We Are Easy Allies panel at PAX. So that meant we had to fly 3 of us. We had to set 3 of us up in a hotel, and that was without really any kind of equipment. Like, Ian just brought his camera in his bag, and we used that to shoot stuff while we were there. But obviously, we have a lot nicer equipment now, and if we were to do E3 the same way that we typically do E3, we would have to transport all of that to whatever location we were at. Even though it would be hot as the dickens, I would love, if it had to go somewhere, I would be okay if it moved to Vegas. Vegas has a just absolutely massive convention center, and as you know, is a big town. And I don't know if anything's really specifically going on that would be super crazy in the middle of June in Las Vegas. I don't know if that has come up in conversation, but I've been to lots of big cons in Vegas, conventions and cons. But I don't know. That is a scary prospect, and I think it would inevitably mean that if we had to put more resources, which we totally would do, there's no way we're skipping E3. There's no way we're just like, well, I guess we won't cover E3 anymore. We would have to send all 9 of us to a place. We'd have to buy tickets. We'd have to set up a hotel for all of us to stay there. Hopefully some of us would maybe have friends that lived in whatever town it moved to. And we'd have to move all of our equipment as well. One of us might have to go on a big road trip. And so that would potentially sap the budget of other events that we would maybe want to go to, like a Gamescom or a GDC or a PAX, unfortunately. E3 is really big for us. I think we've made a name for ourselves repeatedly at E3, and I think it would be a mistake for us not to cover E3 the way that we typically do. So, EZA from Las Vegas, and they're broke, says Max Moon. Yeah, at least we got 1 more year, fingers crossed. We get a studio, and then E3 moves. Straw Hat Ninja, can you tell us what? Can you let us know what allies are going to be live reacting during each conference ahead of time? I know it's a minor detail, but I'd like to know what allies to expect for each conference. I hear you. That stuff does fluctuate. I know it did for me because one of the things I signed up for some press conferences that I wanted to attend that I ended up not attending because I wasn't sure what was going to be there. Like, Sony and Xbox were 2 good examples because they had demos. Sony was the first place that I'd played Spider-Man, and so I'm grateful going to that. I bumped into a lot of fun people at the Sony party, so I'm grateful to going to that event for that. And I had plans to go to the Sony press conference. I ultimately took that time and I was on Jeff Keighley's stage for the E3 coverage by YouTube Live. But Daniel Bloodworth went to the Xbox event because after that he was able to get a lot of direct feed. That's when he played Assassin's Creed. That's when he played Ori and the Blind Forest, when he played Forza. So like a lot of that footage that you saw during our E3 coverage was captured directly following the press conference. And that sometimes EA Play was another great example. I went to Electronic Arts because I was able to play Battlefield and Unravel, even though everyone was able to play Unravel, because we're at those specific events. And a lot of those events, it's not really clear how that's going to work until, the days leading up to it. It's also clear you see like unannounced game, like Unravel was unannounced game. And when we see unannounced game, it's like, A, is that going to be available? B, is that going to be something we care about? There's just a lot of questions going into do we really want to commit to being on the desk or not being on the desk for many, many reasons. And so even up until that morning when like I walked out of my house with my suit on, I kind of came in like, hey, am I going to be on this panel? And panels changed at the last minute. We had some allies that came in late or missed certain scheduled times. And so some of us had to fill in for different spaces. And so it's hard to make a definitive call, even hours before who specifically is going to be on that desk. And so I wouldn't want you tuning into something expecting to see an ally, and then you don't get that ally when you tune in. So, it is time for the E3 2018 post-mortem that we crack open at the beginning of E3 2019 and go, oh yeah, there's all the mistakes we made last year. So I'll put that on the list and I'll see what we can do. Lee, longtime follower, but only recently became a patron. Thank you, Lee. The reason? Infinity War. I just had to hear you guys, I just had to hear your impressions. So there's a little validation for your exclusive show strategy. The issue is, I had absolutely no idea you guys did a spoiler cast for that movie already. My suggestion, a montage of clips from your Patreon exclusive shows. Just show off the titles, plus some quick animated Huber reactions and you'd be set. However, I don't think it'd get much traction as a small monthly video on YouTube, therefore I think that quick montage would work much more effective as a stinger, akin to your E3 montage that played before after your E3 streams. I think a Patreon stinger would work great. You also put it in the middle of Twitch streams during maintenance or breaks for more traction than something else at the end of a video. Maybe even in YouTube content, the podcast, etc., or to perhaps replace the Patreon plug, or closing out the really old GT videos that had a quick ad for the website at the end. Cool, I'll put that on takeaways. I think that's a good idea. I think anything like that, a promo, we could run that during Easy Living. I mean, I think also kind of what you're describing, Lee, is just a Patreon promo in general, Like, I think it'd be nice to have a video that we roll that's like, hey, by the way, we're on Patreon, and here are the goals that you get, and here specifically are these exclusive shows. So I think we could hit... two birds with one stone with that one. Kerbu, the overlays created by your friends, sadly forgot the name for who created them, Chris LaRue. Chris LaRue also had a couple friends involved, whose name, he wrote us a letter recently, and I literally tried to look for that letter the other night, but I think I have placed it in a stack that is too deep to go through at the moment. Used for the streams and breaks were a great surprise. They were almost right up there with the equipment upgrades for slick new presentation upgrades. Is this something you and the other allies would consider using for podcasts, e.g. Ian bringing up the current topic during the Easy Allies podcast, or special group streams like Easy Living? Or is this purely a tool to improve your E3 coverage? Right now it's just a tool for E3 coverage, but that could be potentially something if we wanted to improve our visuals in the coming months or potentially when we get into a studio. I like putting that at the end of top 10s. Okay. It's interesting that Blood sent that to me. He wants me to see that because it says Easy Allies is saying that and is also referencing Easy Allies. So Easy Allies, Easy Allies. I like putting that at the end of top 10s. Yeah, go check out our exclusive stuff. No early access or exclusivity for top 10s. Correct. Or is this purely a tool to improve your E3 coverage? Would also love any insight and behind-the-scenes looks into what went into building and managing the overlays sometime too, if that isn't too big of an ask. I don't know if I'm gonna like show you specifically how that works, but just basically imagine like an HTML page. If you've ever gone into like the settings of like Facebook or something like that, like just imagine a page that has a bunch of options, and then so for example, we could manually type in lower thirds on the fly and then put those in, but we could also, we had a drop-down menu, so that was really convenient when we were like, all right, who's on the table? And then we could just select one after the other, like, you know, chair 1, chair 2, chair 3, if like Brandon's in one and Ian's in one and Kyle's in one. We could also use that HTML page to update what song we were playing, update information in the lower third. So a lot of that was referencing another website that was built by Chris and his team, and so that was how we pulled a lot of that stuff off. And I think it could be potentially something that we use in the future. We just don't necessarily want to. We did get some criticism off of our E3 graphics, the coloring and the size and the, you know, font size and the font color, and everybody's a critic. And so I think we would maybe kind of revisit that whole process if we were to make that something permanent that we use moving into Easy Allies. But I'll put that as a takeaway too. Why not? Do. Ba-do-do-do, ba-do-do-do-do-do. Yeah, we might skip personal questions this week. I'm sleepy and we got a lot of business to talk about. Yeah, thank you to Chris and the team. I'm trying to think of anything else that HTML page did. But yeah, just anytime you saw text pop up, that was something that we could manually type in before and then make live. Cool. Yeah, some people were talking about the curtain. Some people really didn't like the curtain. We will see if the curtain returns. I just wanted to respond to your don't watch this on YouTube, watch it on Patreon. I don't know that I said that last week. I said I hope you're watching this on Patreon. And I'll give more details as to why I said that. I don't know if this is because I'm not American or it's just a me thing, probably the latter, but since Patreon is tied to my credit card info, I don't like having it open for too long. Again, it's probably just me, and many will probably have tons of good reasons for why it's okay, but it just doesn't feel entirely safe to me, this payment method being so easy to use and all. So I'd love it if you'd read the YouTube comments now and then. I mean, I got the YouTube comments going up right now, so live chat on YouTube, that's the chat that I read. And if not, I hope you'll at least forgive me and others, of course, for watching and posting comments on YouTube instead of Patreon. Please post comments on YouTube. I do not take those comments into the next episode. I only take the comments from Patreon if you want to leave a comment, because that is how I know specifically that that person is a patron of Easy Allies and I'm answering a patron question. The reason why I said, well, it's like you were saying, where you're like, I don't hang out on Patreon, I go to YouTube. That was what I was talking about, that like you have gained access to every Cup of Jones episode through YouTube, through Patreon. How this works, I mean, this is an unlisted stream. This is a location. If someone had the URL to this, they could watch it and not necessarily be a patron of Easy Allies. Not to put that thought into your head. But the exclusive stuff that we do that is exclusive to Patreon does have a web link, can be shared with people who are not patrons. And that is poor form, old boy. We want people, what? To be patrons that are receiving our exclusive stuff, because we do lots of stuff that is not exclusive. So if you are stealing our Patreon stuff, shame, shame. But yeah, that's what I meant. You can like actually just watch the thing wherever you want. I have it on the PC, I have it open on both Patreon and YouTube as well, so I understand the process. I just hope this is how you gain access. I hope you are watching Cup of Jones because you are a $1 patron or above. That is how the show works. Reagan Raiden. Love the name. Reagan Raiden. Do you think it would be a good idea if Spoiler Mode actually announced ahead of time what the movie or game is that would be discussed would be? Friendcode does this in a similar light, albeit purely for the sake of gathering patrons' questions related to the topics being discussed. But I think if Spoiler Mode did this, it could actually bring in more people. So I'm guessing what you're saying is making a Patreon post saying we're doing it. We don't want to flood Patreon too much. I don't want to have too many like trailers for shows that we do. Every now and then we do little promos and little announcement things. And I know Frametrap does that specifically to facilitate the acquisition of questions. But I don't know if we necessarily want to make a video that's like, we're gonna do a spoiler mode. I know I would have done whatever was in my power to hear your guys' thoughts about Infinity War. The drop of the video post on Patreon may, in fact, be enough, and announcing topics ahead of time may become redundant, but announcing the game or movie ahead of time could also give people the heads up that they didn't know they needed to finish or watch whatever is being discussed before the video comes out. It's also just more information being out there for the people who may just be checking out the Patreon for the first time, who may also be completely unaware of your guys' exclusive shows, which then allows that person to have more opportunities to see something they may absolutely want to watch you guys talk about. Yes, I don't know if that'll be a Patreon post, but we will do a better job. And I think this speaks to something that a concern that we are seeing pop up all over the place, which is a better communication to non-patrons of Patreon exclusive content. So again, what's the point of having something behind the paywall if people who are not behind that paywall aware that it even exists? And so I think we should be more transparent about when we're shooting spoiler modes, when we have those planned. We did talk about those last night. One thing that is very important for us is for us to have an attached producer to spoiler modes. One spoiler mode that we did talk about that we did not deliver, because when the time came to it, there were just not a lot of people that were directly invested in it at the time, and that was Jurassic World. Don was a big fan, but Don was like, I don't necessarily want to be a part of a spoiler mode because I just want to enjoy that film, because he's a big fan, enjoy it on his own, which is certainly understandable. And there weren't just enough of us that were not only planning on seeing Jurassic World, but we're going to see it directly. So we think that, like, when we do a movie spoiler mode, it makes sense to do it like that weekend, you know, to have it be up right away, to plan to see it right when it comes out, and then do a video very, very shortly after. So we now directly assign producers to those things, so we make sure that they happen. And I am the producer of the next Easy Allies spoiler mode, and that will be Ant-Man and the Wasp, which opens the beginning of July. I believe it's like a week away, week or two away, maybe. The end of next week. So I think next Saturday, a week from Saturday, I believe we are shooting that, but we'll have more details about that coming up. And also, as Daniel Bloodworth is reminding me right now, that I was thinking to say, but I think I just forgot it, and now he's just reminded me again. The spoiler modes are also labeled in our schedule on EasyAllies.com. So as you can see, we have a spoiler mode just went up for Detroit Become Human, if you did not know that we did that. And so you can go see Mr. Michael Huber and Daniel Bloodworth talk about that game at great length, and that is in the schedule, as will be Ant-Man and the Wasp, and potentially any other spoiler modes that we have planned for the month of July. More details on that coming soon. Very soon, because we figured it out last night. So Hasney, one thing you said on that little sip of Jones after the goal was hit was that there would be an obvious hiatus of content while the moving happens. I was wondering if you would be interested in doing a moving and studio setup video blog to cover some of the gap. While I'm sure there will be an excellent easy update video about the setup, as is tradition, maybe having something a bit more raw when a significant event happens, or just something you want to talk about might be fun, even if it's shot on a phone. Yes, we will take that under advisement. I don't know if that is necessarily a takeaway. I think that's something that will just organically come out of us doing something that size. I think it'll be the greatest physical undertaking Easy Allies has taken in our operation, maybe outside of the concert. And so I think we will definitely want to document that. VG Junkie, are the Allies okay with taking a hit to salaries for startup costs and maintaining a studio? Or are there any other concerns about what it would be? Seems like it would be a pretty significant investment in this town, although hopefully you would continue to grow enough to offset it and more. All of those things, yes. But primarily, I want to address the fact that, like, yeah, we are okay in taking hits to our salaries because that's Easy Allies. That's basically how we operate. Anytime we want to make a move in a big direction, we tighten our belts, and we our salary can potentially fluctuate. Obviously, we don't want that to be a surprise to any of the allies. It's something that we discussed beforehand, but that is one of the concerns moving forward. That is one of the reasons why we're taking a couple months before we actually pounce on a new studio, once we have figured out where that could potentially be. So yes to all of that. Brandon Cooper, imagine a scenario in which the Allies have had a studio for a while and have just renewed their annual lease on the space, and for whatever reason, the money dips too much to maintain that studio. Have you been saving money for a scenario in which you are liable for the payments on the studio for a full year, given the desired income may not be there? Not for a full year yet, but that's something we could do. Hope this is never a situation where that happens, but it was the first thing I thought of as we were getting close to achieving the studio goal. That's the first thing we think of. That's the first thing when talking about a studio, is the fact that like we need to maintain that. We need to be above that goal. Obviously, there are things that we could do financially to help us support in the event that our Patreon dips below 50K. And I'm sure we want to have a situation where even if it does dip below 50K, we are able to maintain that studio. But obviously, just like you kind of saw priority shift in May when we dropped below the level that we wanted to be, you would see priority shift and you would see kind of a more direct campaign to alert people to the fact of how important it is that we stay in that studio, how much we rely on our patronage, and potentially find those gaps that would exist if we were to have that lack of support, and find the reasons why, and possibly plug those holes. Aurelien Grenier, you said last week that it took you 2 hours or 3 hours to cut the podcast. How can it be so long? I'm not an expert, but you don't edit the video, especially now that Ian is doing it live. Why is it so long? I do edit the video. I edit it in the sense of, you know, I gotta, even though Ian does do the camera switching live, I do put in the music for podcast halftime. I put in the corrections music. I put in, you know, Kyle's slam. I put, we change out the text for every podcast halftime. Sometimes people will write new bits at the beginning of the month. We'll have changes to podcast halftime once a month at the end of every month. I believe that is the next episode. Oh dear, yes, that's tonight's episode. Oh boy, I got to do podcast producer credits. Potentially, do we have a Tuesday at the end of this month? I don't know. Is this you're all gonna find out now? The fear. You're gonna see the fear settle in. No, we don't. This is the last Tuesday of the month. Tonight is podcast producer night. Great. Which adds a little extra time. And there is just the lining up of the audio. We shoot the camera on, we shoot our video on one thing, we get our audio from another device, and so we have to sync those things up. Sometimes those are a little bit off, so you got to rate stretch to make that stuff line up. Got to line it in with our intro of the podcast, close with our outro, put in lower thirds. So like there is a lot of little tiny steps that are sprinkled on top of the edit to where you get that video file that is, obviously all of this is moot if you are listening to the Easy Allies podcast, but if you watch the video, that work does need to come into place. I need to figure out, you know, add the scores for bets and stuff like that. The other thing to keep in mind is, yeah, I'm not, basically what I'm saying is not like that 2 to 3 hours accounts for me directly being at my desk and working on the podcast, but from the moment the allies leave the garage to the moment I go to bed, it's a 2 to 3 hour process. So that not only just means the editing of the podcast, that is cleaning up after the group stream, that's maybe taking Sophie for a walk, that's, giving Amanda a smooch before she goes to bed, that is communicating with the other allies in Slack, because we have a meeting every Tuesday night, albeit a little small meeting now, in between the group stream and the podcast. There also might be issues related to the podcast that we need to address. While I'm cutting the podcast, I might like to put something on in the background, like I'll turn on something on Netflix or Amazon Prime, like a big, fun, colorful movie that I can watch with the volume off, and just kind of relax. You know, I might take a moment to like check my email, and it's just kind of like that time period between when, you know, the podcast ends and when I actually go to sleep. So it wasn't specifically just editing the podcast; it was the Tuesday afterglow Jones hangout session in the garage. Basically, is a 2 to 3 hour thing. It'll definitely be a 3 hour thing tonight if I'm doing podcast producer credits. Henry Ramirez, I know that Easy Livin' is in the early planning stages, but how feasible would a live podcast be? It's great watching you play games, but a small break would be nice, preferably outside around a campfire. No, Henry. No. We're not going to do the podcast during Easy Livin'. For one reason, it's not Tuesday. We do our podcast on Tuesday nights. And for another reason, I know you say it's great watching you play games, but a small break would be nice. No! There's no breaks during Easy Livin'. The whole point of Easy Livin' is for us to play games. So we will not be doing the podcast during Easy Livin'. We will be playing games for all of those 50 hours, but one thing that would be fun, that I'm not going to make any promises because it's new equipment. I don't know how it's going to translate to another space if we pack all this stuff up and move it and set it all up again. But we have fun new cameras and we have a switcher. And so it would be fun setting up a cozy space where somebody could sit behind the switcher and potentially during longer periods of gaming, change up the camera setup of how things look to the viewer at home. So last year we just kind of had like a big camera looking at the entire room. It'd be nice to then also set up a close-up so we could have one camera that's just looking. So like when Michael Huber and myself were just playing Resident Evil 2 and SSX early in the morning when everyone else was asleep, you didn't necessarily need the wide shot of the entire room, or when potentially the game doesn't need to be the biggest thing in frame and maybe we want to push in on a conversation or an interview or something like that that's happening. We can maybe change that stuff up. So visually, we could maybe give you the small break that you desire and deserve, Henry Ramirez, from the typical setup of how each game is shown during Easy Livin'. But stopping the whole thing and just doing a talkie-talkie, I don't know if that's what we want to do during Easy Livin'. Mark Dalga. I've been following the GT-EZA staff since the beginning of GTTV and Invisible Walls back in 2008, but I only just committed to being a regular Patreon, donation. The reason was that I wasn't in a financial position to regularly contribute a set amount for the foreseeable future, and I did not want to increase the dedicated Patreon value of EZA if I was going to withdraw the next month. Instead, I regularly talked about you guys with my friends, posted links to content, and kept on the lookout for any and all Twitch streams. Now that I am a patron, I feel like I'm getting far greater rewards for much less effort. Every month, a set amount of cash is taken out of my bank account automatically. I get an email letting me know about the withdrawal, but otherwise, I really don't pay much attention or commit to any effort. In exchange, I get early access to shows I love and access to shows to which I previously had no access. Some people do not like Patreon, as you have noted many times, or do not feel comfortable with that level of commitment. However, they do many other things like actively subscribe and follow on Twitch or Twitter, or give money to the E3 fundraiser. I feel those people are not incentivized or rewarded as much as $5 or even $1 patrons. Recently, a patron commented on how his friend is not a patron, but donated $100 to the fundraiser. That is over 1.5 years for a $5 patron, or over 8 years for a $1 patron, yet they get no rewards or dedicated content. What can EZA do to thank and reward supporters from other areas besides Patreon? I don't know why I'm using that mouse. That's an interesting question. Yeah, I think... I don't know. I think that is a concern. It's just a very good question. I think that's a concern that I had after that fundraising stream went smashing. When it was we performed much better than I thought we would, and that's why I made the video, being like, it's difficult for me to express how grateful we are, how incredible this feels to have that much support, and I don't know what to do at this point to thank those people. The trouble is, all those people are all around the world, and so all you can do, the most cost-effective thing to do here at Easy Allies is to spread the word either on live streams or produced shows or on social media, and say thank you and express our gratefulness, because if we were to be like, well, if you do that, we'll send you this pin, the cost of mailing that pin to anywhere in the world could potentially offset the donation that they made, that they would, of course, not want to go into, getting free merch or something like that, but go into supporting Easy Allies. And so that is a tricky thing, and I think that is something that hopefully we will get better at, and hopefully people understand the gratefulness is a packaged deal, that, like, of course, if you were and the gratefulness extends across the board. Like, you don't just have to donate $100 to us during a fundraiser for us to be grateful for your support. You don't have to be a patron for us to be grateful. If you just tell somebody about us, if you just listen to our podcast, if you are in some way involved in Easy Allies, we a lot of times feel like we don't deserve that love and respect and support. And so certainly, to the levels that we do, and so the levels that we receive. And so that is a constant struggle. I think you've really hit on one of the things. I really like to have short, effective, or potentially cheeky answers to a lot of questions, but you really bring something up that I feel inadequate a lot of the time, that I am not communicating to people effectively how much that means, and how incredible it feels to get a one-time donation like that and get support in so many different ways. I just feel that so many of those things, as we saw comments that were included in donations, seemed to be phrased in a way that they understood what that meant, that they understood how much closer that got us to our goals. And hopefully, from watching Easy Allies content since that fundraiser stream and watching our E3 coverage, you can see where that money went and what we are doing with it to improve the quality of content that we produce here at Easy Allies. I'm gonna mute my mic while I sneeze. I can do it now. And I'm back. I love it. Love the new setup. Case in point, just the wonderful setup right now with the switcher and being able to see the multiple monitors, and so I can just see one monitor, and yeah. Adam, up until now, you've been careful not to promise anything for the studio, but last week you flat out said, with the new studio comes new shows. And I'll admit, I'm skeptical. All of the allies have at some point said that they have no free time and not enough people. That bottleneck's not really addressed with getting a studio, so I can't imagine much changing. You guys will just switch from driving from one destination to another. I certainly will. Actually, your commute will go from 0 to some, so if anything, the total free time will decrease. How optimistic are you that you'll be able to pull off more shows? Will the allies be willing to work on more shows, or do you plan to sunset current shows? I'd honestly be satisfied if things mostly stay the same, but I'm worried others will complain and cut their pledge if you hype up the studio and nothing really changes but the backdrop. An excellent point, and something we will take under advisement. I do want to talk very briefly about my free time, because I will have commutes, but consider this. If we have a day like we had on Monday, which we did have a meeting that I did, show up for because I live here. But Monday we shot an episode of Frame Trap, and we shot several episodes of Tabletop Escapades. I was not in that episode of Frame Trap, and I am not a cast member on Tabletop Escapades. So typically, if that was a Monday or a Thursday or a Friday or sometimes a Tuesday before, after we shoot Cup of Jones and before we do our Tuesday night group stream, I would not have access to the garage. So if I wanted to edit something, I would have to do it in the house just on my lone little laptop. If I wanted to record something in the VO booth, I couldn't. If I left something on my desk or on the stage, I couldn't get to it because we're shooting the show. If I wanted something out of that fridge, if I wanted to access the PC, if I wanted to use this garage in a multitude of ways, when it is being used for shooting something I am not involved in, I do not have access to the stage. Imagine a world where I only need to go to the studio once or twice a week. Like I only need to be a part of the production of Easy Allies just a little bit, because that production takes place somewhere else. That'll actually give me, I think, even though it will add, 2 hours of a commute onto a workday, potentially 3 hours, depending on where we are, that'll actually give me a lot more time. And that's actually one thing that I'm excited about is there's a lot of opportunities where I've missed out on editing something because I have to get up early to help people set up for a shoot, or I have to, I'm not in the garage. Case in point, the Pixel Junk Monsters 2 review I cut just on my laptop, really small, while I was like on my couch in the house. And so if I was to actually change this from the Easy Ally studio into the Brandon Jones studio, I'm really curious to see productivity-wise how that changes things. What I meant with more shows is a twofold answer. One, we'll have more goals, and those goals will be more things that we will produce that potentially people might want from us. And we clarified a lot of things of what that would and would not be last night. We checked in with a lot of people that don't necessarily have shows that they're directly involved with, and wanted to gauge their involvement and what it would take financially for them to be more committed in certain ways. How we could speed up the editing process. There have been times where we have had scripts written and VO done, and no one has time to go in and cut something because we have an event coming up, or somebody's on vacation, or we're just caught up with doing other things. And so I think it is inevitable also, the other thing, to talk about new shows with a new studio because of just the inevitable change in how we produce everything. Every single show will be reevaluated in what is the easiest way to produce it in the new space. Granted, some of those things might take a little more time than before, but I think no matter what, inevitably, new opportunities are going to come up, I would not be surprised if you see some things change from how we normally produce them. Again, you might see a show that is recorded that is now done live, or vice versa, you might see some things that are just easy to produce because we have more opportunities for all of us to be there. Like, for example, right now, when we do stuff on Tuesday nights, it's very easy to attach things to a Tuesday because we know everyone is going to be here on Tuesday nights. It's our group stream. It's the time where we ring the dinner bell and all of the allies come running, and we all congregate for at least one guaranteed time per week. This Saturday will be our Q&A. Unfortunately, I'm going camping with my in-laws, so I will not be on the Q&A this weekend, but it's another opportunity that we know we can contact everybody, that we know everybody will be around and available. And that availability is going to evolve now that we're in the studio. Like, we are potentially going to package shows differently. We're going to potentially know that if one thing is being shot, then that means I can shoot something else. We're getting better, I think, month by month about planning shoots in advance. And I think we can basically revisit the schedule and look at how we produce things and just have more opportunities to not have to slide a green screen in when we're shooting stuff, even though that is way easier than what we used to do before, but potentially just painting a wall in the studio green and just being like, let's just swivel that over and do a little green screen bit for something, or help out with an easy update episode, or potentially do a new show. I made a careful point not to say what that show would be, but whether it comes in the form of a new goal that we have to put up on Patreon that hopefully we can get to someday, or something that we promise, or something that we just deliver. I think one next step that we have to do now that And for That Reason is approaching its conclusion, I think we're like 3 episodes in, we are, at some time going to want to produce another Patreon exclusive limited run series. And so you will definitely be seeing more of that in the future. So it's less of a promise thing, it's less of a scheduling thing, and more of just that the opportunity will be present. And even though I know the allies have stated that we are all overworked and we are all doing way too much, the opportunities that present themselves with the studio are sometimes just too exciting. So I could see us being involved in more. But obviously, hold on that until we announce more stuff as we get closer to making that studio a reality. Wesley, do you think there will ever be a point where you don't display your monthly revenue on the Patreon homepage? I don't know. I personally really appreciate the transparency, as do we. It's why we do it. I do think it's poor form in general to crowdsource revenue and then hide this figure. What is your general thought on this? I don't know if it's poor form because I don't know too much about it. I know there are other Patreons that do it. I haven't talked with them. That might be like asking a lady her age. That might be like crossing a line, potentially. I don't know. Because I'm sure lots of other properties have many different reasons for why they do that. I think once you get into a period where you have a lot of outside sponsorship, where you have a lot of big companies sponsoring the things that you do, you don't necessarily want to make public the divide between the money that you're getting in through outside sources and the money that you're getting in through Patreon. Obviously, we get revenue in from YouTube through ads, and we get revenue in through Twitch through subscriptions, but that pales in comparison to the big grand number that we get through Patreon. That is our breadwinner. That is our primary source of income. And so I just think, because of the nature of the question of that is Easy Allies, of how big is this going to be, what is this going to grow into, and that we want to make sure that our community definitely feels an agency, that definitely feels responsible for the big changes that happen here at Easy Allies. It's why we want to make that transparent. We would not be having this conversation right now about a studio if it had not been transparent and people hadn't seen not only where those big changes are coming from, but who is making those big changes. I also think it makes people understand and realize that that giant bump is the that we have had a bump in June, but that bump has been a considerable bump because of a small select group of people. And if those people continue to support us at that level, that's fantastic, and we are extremely grateful to them. But just in case it is not, we want to be realistic moving forward. I think that dialogue is much easier to understand and digest if you can see where we're at. If you can basically see the same numbers that we are working with, and if you can chart where we're at compared to other dates. And so that's personally why we do it. I'm not going to drop any thoughts on why I think other people don't, because I honestly don't know. I've never had that conversation with them. I can theorize, but that's not a cool thing to do, I don't think. Corey Swafford, I know you said you plan to have some stretch goals beyond the 50K mark on Patreon, and I thought I'd share something I would definitely enjoy having. My idea is a weekly Ask an Ally segment. I imagine it being very similar to Cup of Jones, only with a different ally each week. I love Cup of Jones because any questions I have will almost certainly be addressed, and though I love you, Jones, sometimes it would be great having another allies to take on our questions as well. I think I was going to write that one down too. Ask an Ally. Add it to the takeaways. Done. Yeah, so we have lots of business questions, so I think we're just going to wrap it up after the business questions are done. Pokey Clyde, would you consider making a 52K tier even though you've already reached that goal? I know goals are incentives to reach higher, but a 52K goal would be a way to maintain what you have and make sure you don't drop very far below that line. Anyways, I think you can still shoot What a Studio Means for Us promo video. You should still shoot a What a Studio Means for Us promo video. That depends on how busy I am over the next couple months and where we are financially over the next couple months, if I actually go to do that. But I wanted to communicate some of those more specific points to you via Cup of Jones, because we're already there. I don't know, potentially. I think last night 54 was kind of the number that we started at, that we were talking about new goals. Again, we have not landed on any of these goals, nor have we landed on that amount. Obviously a new 60K goal would be fun. It'd be fun to like have another big fun goal now that we reached the biggest goal that we had. But just like moving into studio, it's something we want to take very seriously. We don't want to promise new things and then realize, like, wait a minute, whoa, we got too excited with all the studio hype, and that's potentially something that we can't deliver. Yeah, hold on and wait, patience for new goals. If our Patreon suffers because of us not having new goals, then that's something that we will deal with in the immediate future. A Pack of Puppies, with the Easy Living trailer popping up at the, I called it Easy Living, it's Easy Living. With the Easy Livin', I'll actually make that adjustment. With the Easy Livin' trailer popping up at the end of E3 coverage, time to remind you, can we get extra footage of beachy stuff this time? Something more than just one episode of Easy Update? I love the Easy Livin' Easy Update, but I need more. I need you all playing beach volleyball and surfing and building sandcastles and skateboarding on the boardwalk. I can't promise beach volleyball or surfing or building sandcastles or skateboarding on the boardwalk. I don't even know if there will be a boardwalk in whatever location that we get. But I can promise you more of a beach feel. I think that was something that that I didn't really think of before we actually got to the venue. Like, I got there and I was like, oh, we could be anywhere right now. Like, and so, yeah, I think we definitely want to potentially get a location that is much easier to show off the beach environment, or make a point to go out and shoot more things, possibly shoot little interstitials, maybe like make little "we will be right back" screens, something. And that's also something that we talked about when we got there. I believe we started like at night, and I think we all got there and then set up really quickly and then went live. And so we're talking about potentially getting there earlier. And so if we got there earlier, then we can shoot some promo stuff when we get there ahead of time and then use that as roll-ins. Yeah, the Pack of Puppies, that's one of the big ones. That's one of my big takeaways from last year that I want to do this year. So your concerns do not fall on deaf ears. Alex, is there any chance you will review your stream layout and size of windows? I love watching the press conferences along with EZA, but I feel that even on my TV, the conference window is too small. Currently, it feels as though there's a lot of wasted space, and I feel that the size of the allies could be kept pretty constant, which also makes the live stream larger. It's just a thought and we continue to watch regardless, but I definitely think the current format could be improved in some way. This is like the #1 comment, critique, criticism that we get from our E3 coverage, that we get from any coverage whenever we do reactions, and it is one of the things that I lament because I know somebody's gonna have a problem with it. Alex also, if you want to check it out, left a visual aid on the episode from a week ago of Cup of Jones. to show specifically what they meant about how that shot could be set up. The thing is, Alex, we're pretty cozy. Like that, what you see on screen is not an accident. It's not something where we're just like, well, see how this goes. We have long debated. I believe like Ian and Blood and Damiani and Kyle, I think, are like the most focused on how big everything is, where things are, where other shots are in relation to that. And I know it can be frustrating for people. I should have like grabbed the visual example that Alex posted in Slack, but if you want to just visualize it in your head, basically imagine Giant Bomb style, where the press conference takes up almost the entire screen, and then there is like a thin bar on the bottom that is all of the allies' heads, along with Damiani's head or whoever is on the switcher in the back there. The issue is this, and there's two main issues, and there's something that like we're just pretty much not going to budge on, and a lot of people had concerns about what, not only how big the press conference was when we are commenting on stuff, but like what we're looking at. I know we chose Twitch for a lot of the live streams that we were doing, and Twitch had some issues. The Sony press conference in particular, the Twitch stream, got botched and blacked out, and I was on the YouTube stage, and I know that because I was watching the YouTube version of that, and so I was like a minute or more ahead of our live stream, and so like we just don't want to have like 80 live streams up, to switch between that stuff as quick as we can. And when we're setting up the camera footage, and I know this can seem very self-serving and egotistical, but we want to be the focus. When we clip that stuff out, when people watch our stuff after the fact, they watch it because they want to see us react. So why we got better cameras, so you can see us. We really want to put ourselves forward. We really want to have ourselves first and foremost. If you want to watch the stream elsewhere, or you want to have that up in another window, you can do that. We hear that from a lot of people. That is how they watch the conferences. They have that. They have that up there. And then they watch us. And I granted, I know sometimes that goes out of sync. There's just really not a lot that we can do about that. The other issue with having because I know you can still see us if you have like the little bar on just our faces, but just like imagine for a second that you're watching us. Like here, can I even do? I can't because I don't have a keyboard. But like, imagine, the bar is here. So the bar is like on top here, right above my head. If you're watching this, some of you might be listening to it, so just ignore me for a second. But if the bar is like above here, and then the bar stops like right here, and then like Resident Evil 8 gets announced, and Huber's like, yeah! Woo! Oh my god, that's such a great announcement! I'm making such expressive faces right now! I'm so excited! Oh man! I am Michael Huber, and I will remember this moment forever as long as I live. And you can see the joy in my face of this announcement that's happening. I'm so happy right now. Woo! Boy, was I happy. And you'd be like, I was looking at his stomach the whole time. I didn't see that. And so it's not just our faces, it's our arms, it's us moving around, it's people potentially coming into the frame to say something. It's when we do Easy Allies coverage, it gets messy. There's just a lot going on. And so for a lot of people that are like, we don't need you, get in the corner, you. And it's like, we didn't get that Shenmue announcement, that Final Fantasy VII announcement, that Resident Evil 7 announcement. Like, those don't trend. Those are not as sought after and as viewed by as many people as they are if people had not seen us. If we had not been, hey man, watch these guys, they're crazy, watch this video, you'd be like, where are they? Oh, they're like at the bottom there. It's like, I know, again, it seems so egotistical, so narcissistic to be like, enough with the Sony press conference, look at us. But like, that's what we're doing. That is our E3 coverage. So that's why we do that. I've never really specifically gone into an example of that, but I mean, it like, we had I don't know if we ever cut to it, but we had another option that was readily available in XSplit that Ian or Damiani could hit at any second. That was a more pulled back shot in case it just became a circus, in case we were all just running around. That's like, whoa, we need to, pull the camera back, and we just don't want to do that. Where we're like, oh no, a big thing is happening. Let me switch the camera. Oh, I missed it. So those announcements only happen once, and we want to make sure that whatever excitement is happening in this room, that is the thing we capture, because you can always go back and watch the press conference anytime you want. You can always bring it up on another screen and watch that. But those priceless Easy Allies moments, if you don't catch them when they happen, whew, they're gone. Jet Eater. There seems to be a good amount of difficulty associated with choosing which particular version of a game to bring to Hall of Greats, and it doesn't make sense to me why you would put that limitation in place. For instance, the version of Street Fighter that got into the Hall of Greats was Turbo, but it's arguable that the original arcade release was more important. If somebody brought the arcade version now, would it be eligible to get in? Yes, I think so. I think I recall this problem occurring with Shadow of the Colossus. Damiani brought the remake, so it's much worse than it would have otherwise. But they're the same game when you boil it down, right? No. You can attribute the accolades of both versions to Shadow of the Colossus. What does the group feel about this rule? It's early enough that the change could still be put in place. I'm curious how to answer this question, Jet Eater, because I don't know what side you're on. I don't know what... It sounds like Street Fighter should just be Street Fighter and then no other versions should be included. I think one of the things that this avoids is, or I think one of the things that this takes care of is that, like, you know, you don't want to, like, what if you were like, I'm bringing Assassin's Creed, and we're like, oh, the first Assassin's Creed, and you're like, no, the franchise, and we're like, well, no, you got to pick something, you know, and like, you know, like, I'm bringing Smash Brothers, like, which one? Like, the 3DS or the Wii U? Those are very different versions of potentially the same game. Very different versions. So yeah, I do think it's important to label, as many people have specified, or we have, you know, somebody that, whose name escapes me right now, but who made a VR version of the Hall of Greats that you can go through, that has secrets. When you go to each area, you can see the official box art. And I think one of my dreams is to have easyallies.com/Hall of Greats, to have a place where you can go, where you can see an archive of all of the things we have submitted into Hall of Greats. And it'd be nice to have, like, the definitive box art for that game that we can post and be like, that game. If you want to be like, oh, I want to play that Hall of Great and I want to go check that out, just don't be like, you can play any version of Street Fighter, it doesn't matter. It's like, no, Turbo specifically. Like, that's the one specifically that person brought up. That was the argument that they made. And I do think that is important. I do think that there are differences between an arcade version of Street Fighter and a home console version. I do think that there are big differences between the original version of Shadow of the Colossus and a remake to come later, because if you are specifically going to show off this remake and say that this is one of the greatest achievements in the history of video games, the fact that this forest looks better, I don't know if that necessarily holds up to, like, GoldenEye, you know, as like a creation. And so, like, when I'm actually at the end dropping my coin in a specific bin and saying, no, this gets my vote, I need to know exactly what I'm voting for. I can't just have just, like, any happy emotions you have about this franchise, all of that is applicable. Like, I think that's unfair, and I think people can potentially lean on favoritism to just kind of, like, you know, wrap everything up. And my argument was for all of Street Fighter 2, but okay. See, here we go. None of us potentially agree on one thing. That's my take on it. Going with Turbo to represent it was just a concession for me. Hall of Greats is all about concessions, isn't it, Daniel Bloodworth? That's my take. These games that, let me put it this way. Some games don't. Some games, there's one version and that is it. There is one version of Journey. It came out, no, that's a lie. They remastered it. They didn't remaster it. They released it again for PlayStation 4. There are some games that were only made once, that only exist on one platform, that are just that own thing. And I don't want those games to be punished for not having a developer decide later that they were worth remastering. You know, that you're like, oh no, the fact that, you know, Skyrim has appeared on 50,000 things, you know, that's why it should be in Hall of Greats. You're like, it should be in Hall of Greats because it's a great game. Like, we shouldn't, that's why when people are like, it's sold this many copies, you're like, all right, like, that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. There are a lot of things that are, you know, huge sellers that are not necessarily the best games that are released every year, depending on who you ask. So yeah, I think it is okay to be specific about that stuff, but that is just my one take. Disclaimer, that is just my one take. I am not making any official decisions on Hall of Greats. Any specific rules or changes in Hall of Greats will only be announced during Hall of Greats. I'm just offering, this is borderline personal chatter here on Cup of Jones. That is just my own personal take on it. And as we have shown, Daniel Bloodworth does not agree. You know, like, I mean, you have Shadow of the Colossus remake. Like, would you consider Resident Evil PS1 and Resident Evil GameCube the same game? Like, I think you could under that argument. I think you could be like, well, you know, just the whole Resident Evil thing. It was on DS, it was on 64, you know, like, wait a minute. It wasn't, Resident Evil 2 was, I believe. So yeah, that is my potentially unwanted hot take on the subject. David Purcell, with the equipment available to you now, are you able to display VR games on the green screen where the players appear in the world? I've seen this done on Clueless Gamer and was wondering if that was possible for you guys to do. A VR show with allies taking the knee in various worlds could be a pretty rad show. Just a suggestion. That does sound fun. I think for group streams it wouldn't work with space. We angled this cord above me as smartly as we could to maximize space, but there still is a big space behind it. And so I don't know if we can maybe potentially do a VR stream. It sounds like a fun idea. It's something we obviously want to potentially explore when we get a studio, but I don't want to make any promises. But it sounds like fun, David. And I know what you're talking about. A lot of people do that. A lot of people do green screen stuff when they stream, which is fun as well. And we've had a lot of requests for adding more green screen stuff to our library of content. Joseph LaRussa, now that you've reached the amount for the studio goal, and it's more likely you will be searching for one in the near future, would you ever consider teaming up with Shane over at Sifted to find a joint, and possibly as a result, larger studio space? They recently got kicked out of their studio because the owner rented the whole floor to a single company, and if you were to work together, you may be able to ensure the studio continues even if the money dips occasionally. I love both EZA and Sifted, and I want you both to succeed, and in my opinion, you could both benefit from joining forces in this regard. I would not suggest merging entities or anything, but cross-promotion could help Sifted, and Sifted could provide some cushion for the rental cost of a studio. I definitely want Sifted to succeed. I definitely, I have, you know, not only Shane, but several friends that work at Sifted and help produce their content. But I've Sifted aside, I don't think we want to partner with anybody for a new space. Like, that seems very frustrating to finally, after, and I said this as much in the 50K and Beyond video, I haven't said it yet in this episode of Cup of Jones, but I'll say this again here. Whatever you consider this entity to be, granted, we started as Game Trailers in 2002. No one other than myself was there at that time that is now involved in this crazy enterprise. That was Game Trailers, that is now Easy Allies. And when we created Game Trailers, we were already in an office of another company. And then we were purchased by MTV. We moved into MTV. And then we moved into the main Viacom building. And then we moved over to Defy. And now we're here. And we are independent, but we are still at someone else's property. This is my property. This was not designed to do this. And so if we were to get a space that we finally move into, and then be like, oh, and then we were also attached to this company. Like that, it's just like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's Funhouse or Mega 64 or Sifted or, you know, Kind of Funny or, you know, Jeff Keighley or whatever. Like, anything that we would have to do to in any way be beholden to another group to have to answer to or have a powwow with or figure something out in terms of a space would make that just a frustrating experience and just be something. Again, we just want that complete and total freedom. It has nothing to do with Sifted. It has nothing to do with how much I want to support Shane in his endeavors. It just has to do with we just want our own space, and we were so close, and we've talked about it for so long, and us being this close and then, you know, giving some of that away to another group would be frustrating. Excuse me. So yeah, that's my answer about that. I'm pretty sure the other allies are on the same page. But again, doesn't mean that fun collaborations can't happen in the future. It doesn't mean that we then can't journey to someone else's space and they can do the same to help promote ourselves or work on specific events together. It just means that if our patrons say, here's this much money to get your own space, we're going to get our own space because that's what we promised to do. Parasite Paladin, I recall you asking for some advice from other people in gaming groups like EZA, gaming groups like Andrea and Greg. Could you share some of what you were told? Anything new or useful? Andrea is always incredibly useful when it comes to introducing me to other people. So a lot of, we talk about grease and palms, and Andrea's got the greasiest palms I've ever seen. I marvel at them every time I grab her poems. I'm like, look at those. Greg specifically, and Kind of Funny specifically. I don't know if any of you know Joy over at Kind of Funny, who handles their community management, who is just an all-around wonderful person. But I've spoken to her and Greg and Tim a lot about not only having a community manager and the responsibilities that they manage, but the very tricky task of bringing up someone from their community into a management role, some of the trials and tribulations that they faced during that process, because I can see, and rightfully so, frustrations from some people in our community when we put the spotlight on certain people, so I want to be sure that we do that in the right way if we were ever to assign more responsibility to someone from our community to do something like community management or any number of jobs. So that is something. There are many other things. The video wall, Kind of Funny. I've directly told Greg Miller whenever we can afford that, we're stealing that. And he's like, hey, everybody else stole it too, so it's fine. We've seen sports channels steal that video wall, so go for it. But I remember that was something that was very useful to us, and that dialogue with them has been very informative. Is it Joey? I've heard it pronounced Joy. I've heard people just call her Joe. Is Joey? I've always called her Joy, and I've heard other people call her Joy. So maybe that's me. Sorry. I know it is spelled Joey, but I just thought it was pronounced Joy. I guess I'm wrong. Moses D. Silfer, can the next Hall of Greats, as well as potentially the previous ones, be uploaded on podcast services in addition to the YouTube upload? Also, I second the request from last week to upload your impressions, commentaries, etc. from E3 and other events to podcast services for increased convenience. Moses, you actually threw out two different... just say jaw while covering your mouth to cover all bases. Sure. Moses, I think you nailed it. You nailed it on the head. And I'm going to take this opportunity to be honest and forthcoming about our it's a good way of putting it. Maybe the delay in us adding some functionality to Easy Allies that you would be expecting. The last two things that you put on there are increased convenience. A lot of people want audio versions of the stuff that we do available so they can check them out on other platforms. What that would do, as Moses has stated, is increase convenience. We would not make more money from it. We would not be alerted. More people wouldn't find out about Easy Allies because audio versions would be available of some things. It would help people that find that is an easier way for them to fit Easy Allies into their lives. We just have a lot of people that are very mobile, that just find themselves in instances where they're like, I just need something to listen to right now. This would be a great opportunity to get Hall of Greats, to get their E3 coverage, to get a Cup of Jones, to get other Fiasco Knots, or to get other things out of the way because I could just focus on the audio version. One thing that tends to clog up our Patreon, because there's not a way, hopefully one day there will be a way to make multiple Patreon posts in one post, but now we got to segment all of that stuff. If we want to post something and do a poll, for example, those have to be two completely different posts. And so whenever I put up Cup of Jones, or whenever we put up like the spoiler mode, I got to send Bloodworth the audio version of spoiler mode so we can make that post as well. Those are two separate posts. And so not only does that make the topics go flying by on our Patreon, but it is more work for us for an increased convenience for our viewers. So to be perfectly honest with you, we're just not jumping up and down to do a lot of that stuff. Following our E3 content, we're not like, oh, I know what I'll do with the next hour, instead of working on the VR segment that I did last week that I still need to cut out and put B-roll on, that I have not had time because I've been editing other stuff this weekend, that I can work on potentially getting a venue for Easy Livin', that I can work on events that we want to do in the month of July, that we can start looking for a studio, that we can do all other things, but I'm not going to be doing that for the next hour because I'm going to be downloading these files, extracting the audio from them, placing them up separately, writing out a specific post. It does take time, and it's just time that will not move the needle right now. It'll just, as you said, increase the convenience of our viewers. And I think that we are getting better at that over time. We have had more things appear in audio form than have been before, and it makes sense for more of them to exist as well. The fact that you're not seeing us jump on that stuff is the fact that we are all pretty slammed with our schedules, and it's just not something that we're going to get a direct bonus of, except from making like a handful of people happy. It's fun making people happy, but it's not always the most prudent use of our time. So apologies, Moses, if that stuff doesn't happen. I know that's got to be frustrating to somebody who you're like, you are directly affecting what I'm going to view, or not view, I'm going to listen to from you all, because that is the easiest way to do that. And we understand, and hopefully we can have that be the responsibility of one of the allies, and have that be something that they do moving forward, is just kind of handling the audio versions of all of the stuff that we do. But it seems like every day, every week, I get a notice from somebody who's like, can we get an audio version of that? And it's like, it basically translates into us doing audio versions of absolutely everything, which would, which I know you're like, I'm not saying everything, I'm just the E3 stuff. But it's like, I know you're saying that, but someone else is like, hey, why don't I get Fiasconauts audio? Or hey, why don't I get this in audio form? And so it is something that I think would make people happy, but is not something necessarily that this Patreon or this channel needs right now. Casey, aka Enderglow, I was curious about how you feel regarding specific seemingly prevalent fan want. To me, it seems like a lot of fans sort of want EZA to become GT 2.0, which is understandable. That's where a lot of us followed you from, me included, and how we got to know all of you, and that content is very near and dear to us. However, I know that EZA's mission is never to be that, and you would kind of made that clear when you started. And while this want for GT 2.0 would be a non-issue whatsoever, it seems like people simply can't let it go, and are intent on bringing it up whenever you guys hit a new milestone or success. For example, now that you've hit 50k, many people are asking for Final Bossman back as a new tier, even though Kyle has made it explicitly clear he doesn't want to do that, and why. I feel like bringing back top 10s is a factor in this as well, since people wanted that for a long time, even though you guys didn't want to do it. But eventually, it seems like you sort of gave in and brought that back. I think this led people to believe that if they ask for something enough, no matter how much you don't want to do it, you'll cave in and give it to them, which isn't the greatest mindset. It might also be part of the nature of being a crowdfunded platform. Now that people have a tangible and direct financial investment in your work, I think they feel more able to ask or demand things of you because they help fund you. And of course, I don't want to say that patrons can't make their voices heard or ask for things, because of course they can, but I think there is a line in demanding that people do something you know they don't want to do just because you want, But I think there's a line in demanding that people do something you know they don't want to do just because you want it, and give them money seems, to me, to kind of cross that line. If it doesn't to you though, then that's cool, and I'll just learn to be okay with it. It depends on the project that you're talking about. Final Bossman, it does cross the line because Kyle's not interested in doing Final Bossman. And so I don't want to make people do something they don't want to do. We have been pretty good in that regard. We have had people pick up the slack in certain areas for financial reasons. We are paying people more money to handle some things that the rest of us don't want to do. There are definitely some business needs that need to be taken care of. They're not the most exciting thing that any of us have ever worked on, but something that we are willing to do because it is a part of the business of running Easy Allies. When it comes to creating content, though, I never want any of us doing something that we don't want to do. I think so much of just the instant success of Easy Allies, so much of what carries us, even though most of our shows are just us sitting at a desk talking about things, is that we are personable, that we are easy to listen to when we communicate with each other, because we are not only excited about talking about things and excited about the things that we talk about, but are excited about the people we are talking about them with. And so I think the moment you give something, give a project to somebody that doesn't want to do it, I think our audience is smart enough to tell. I think they'll be able to see, yeah, this seems like a give. This seems like something that we're like, all right, finally we'll do that. Case in point, doing Cup of Jones live. This is something that I wanted to do. This simplified the whole process of doing Cup of Jones weekly, and a lot of people very much did not want me to do this. They thought that Cup of Jones, and in some ways it has, would decrease, the production value would decrease. They liked the old format, and they were willing to wait for it, and I definitely thought it was important to communicate with our patrons weekly. I think it's worked out really well, and so I don't have a regret in doing that. When with top 10s, that was something we only didn't want to do because of how much work was involved. Even though we are bringing it back, expect the first top 10 very soon, but even though we are bringing that back, we are not doing it weekly like we did before at GT. We got pretty creative with some of the list ideas that we came up with. We are not going to be doing them the way that we did it back at Game Trailers, which was list by list by list. So we would pick a list, we would write the entries, we would gather the footage, and we would cut the video. Then we'd pick the list, we'd gather, we'd write the entries and so on, and then do that cycle. We have already 6 lists selected for the month of 2018. It doesn't mean we can't change those out potentially. Doesn't mean we can't reconsider those things. It's actually kind of nice having a little bit of time before a countdown airs to be like, are we like 100% sure that we're cozy with that list? Maybe if some names pop up during the process of selecting the list, then maybe after the fact we could be like, I remember that game, but not too much. I'm going to play that game, and then in a month we'll revisit that list and make sure we're totally 100% comfortable with the list that we've selected. But the thing about the list, top 10s compared to Final Bossman, again, Final Bossman is not something Kyle is excited about given his current responsibilities and what he's working on with Easy Allies. To bring a show like that to Easy Allies would not be something that he is doing because he's like, I really want to do that. It's something that he would be doing because it would be his job, because it's something that the patrons want. And the countdowns are a happy medium. They're something that our patrons want. They're something that we feel is justified at the financial level that we set it at, that we met, and it's something that we've really enjoyed doing. Like, we enjoy deliberating countdowns. We enjoy working on them. We enjoy writing our individual segments, and we enjoy putting all of that stuff together every step of the way. We just did it weekly back in the day, did it with a strain to meet a lot of other corporate needs at Defy Media, and the prospect of bringing that back just reminded us of a lot of the frustrations that we had when working for a larger parent company. And so we were like, let's just not do that. And then over time at Easy Allies, when we talked about the project, we started to frame it in a more realistic way. And then I think just in general miss it over time. Like, I remember I was getting a drink out of the fridge, and we were handing out assignments to the different people for what they wanted to write. And I was like, oh, we're handing out countdown assignments. I remember doing that. So yeah, and the other thing too, Casey, is those people that complain about those things. You're like, it seems like every time something happens, all these people come out and they complain about things. Well, we have the people that complain that we don't do audio versions of all of our shows. We have people that complain that the press conferences aren't big enough on our E3 coverage. We have people that complain that they don't feel that, you know, we've earned $52K a month on Patreon, and they let us know either on Patreon or in YouTube comments or in social media. So those people are always going to be there. There's always going to be somebody with that voice, and we want to make sure that we're in a position to hear them, but they are not always going to dictate the decisions that we make. Ultimately, whenever we do make a decision with Easy Allies, there is going to be a group of our audience that is not happy about us making that decision every single time. So you always have to consider that as well. Michael Yao, with the recent announcement of YouTube selling their own membership tier, will EZA use this as another revenue source? I don't know. That happened really quickly. We got to figure that out. We have not taken advantage of the different pricing tiers on YouTube yet. We do not have YouTube Red specific shows. We have not even tried to sell stuff like that. But maybe that could potentially be in our future. I can tell you how many conversations have come up about that, and that is 0. Denise Schreiber, have you guys set working hours? I've always wondered that, since back in the GT times, if you have to play and review a 100-hour RPG or produce a really in-depth retro, that requires you to play hundreds of hours of games, and how do you reconcile that with the 40-hour work week? The same with streaming and stuff. Is there a system on how to handle these types of unusual workloads of actually having to play through all of those games you are writing and producing videos on? Are playing hours handled differently than writing hours? Was there ever a structure in place for how long a reviewer should spend on a game? No, and no. I don't, yeah, like, we don't necessarily have like an hour setup. You know, we're not like, how many hours have you worked this week? And then we'll pay you for that. We have weekly and monthly obligations, and we have deadlines. So whenever we get a game in or a project, we say, we want this game reviewed by this point. We want this show to premiere at this point. That is the deadline that we need to produce that by. And then a producer is assigned to that project. It's up to that producer to decide how much work needs to go into that, who needs to be involved, and when is the realistic time for that to be seen by everybody, to finally be released released and shown to the world. With reviewers, again, that's just deadline based. So Ben and Huber definitely take the brunt, and Bloodworth and Damiani, they definitely take the brunt of the majority of reviews. Brad has been reviewing a lot of games. I have not been reviewing a lot of games in 2018. That will certainly change come September and October. If we have a deadline set in place, it's kind of up to that person based on their responsibilities. So if Ben is reviewing a game, he also has the Q&A, he also has his Patreon responsibilities, he has Frame Trap, and he has things that he specifically works on. So it's up to him to juggle how do I make time for these things and make time for reviews. And a lot of times you will see us not... The Lego games, case in point. Like, the Lego games take a lot of time to go through, and I very much would have loved to review those games, but I didn't. So I would have loved to review Lego Ninjago and Lego City Undercover when that came out on PS4, and Lego Marvel Superheroes 2. Lego DC Supervillains looks super jolly. I'll see if I can stream that if I get a chance, but I don't know if I will most likely not be reviewing it because I just don't have the time. So that's not a question of Easy Allies doesn't have enough money to pay me for the hours required. I just do not have enough hours. I would have to stop doing other responsibilities that I have. So the cutoff is not a assignment of what types of hours we have. It is just generally, do we have the hours, period, with all the other responsibilities that we have here at EZA. Alex Pizzo, once you guys finally get a studio, have you or the Allies talked about if Don will join full-time with y'all? I know he's working at Funhouse. I know he is working at Funhouse, but I also know he loves you guys, or will he just work for both of the companies? For the foreseeable future, Don will most likely work for both of the companies. You have to understand that how much Don makes it Easy Allies, makes it Funhouse, and how much any editor in any editing position in Los Angeles makes to work full-time is just not something we can afford for anybody at Easy Allies. We can't afford it for us, you know, myself as an editor, or Ian as an editor, or Don. And so all of the work that is done is done for a vastly reduced salary, purely just for the love of the job, the love of our community, the ownership that we all feel of Easy Allies, because this is all our baby, and we want to see it grow and thrive. That is a topic that's come up. And we've painfully realized every time that Don's just too cool. We can't afford him. Falcon, can you explain why And For That Reason's first episode isn't public on YouTube, with an explanation that the rest of the episodes are $1 Patreon exclusive? It's already publicly viewable on Twitch, so it's not like it's technically exclusive right now anyway. The big difference is putting it on YouTube would be helping the Patreon potentially a lot. There was a decent bump of patrons when it premiered on Twitch, with the 2,000 watching live, and even if the YouTube video only matches that, it'd still be worth it. This seems like another instance of poor communication with your YouTube audience. If you search for And For That Reason on your channel, the only thing that comes up is podcasts, not even a promo. What's the point of exclusive shows if no one knows they exist? First one free is usually how stuff behind a paywall works. Give them a taste and leave them wanting more is the whole point. So I'd highly recommend releasing it on, or better yet, making a public version with some added Patreon info, as the potential benefits are substantial with pretty much zero downside. Some bold statements there, Falcon. Of course there's a downside. Like, how we communicate what is available on Patreon and what people can get on Patreon, the access that they have to them, I think for our audience on Twitch, it seemed, I think likely that if we were to show them one episode of something, because I think our Twitch audience, more than our YouTube audience, absorbs more of the content. I think if people are hanging out with us on Twitch, it's likely that they watch a pretty wide expanse of different types of EZA shows. Or I could see people that come in just for Game Sleuth, that come in just for the podcast on YouTube, that come in just to watch one specific thing. And so there is also the potential, you're like, if you put that up on YouTube, then just all these people would come to Patreon. That's the only thing that would happen from that, is just Patreon numbers going up. I could potentially see people watching the first episode and being like, all right, that's fun. I don't need to see more of that, but I appreciate that. There is also the benefits of finishing the run of the season of And For That Reason, and then making it public, potentially the first episode, and then making all of it public, and potentially like rolling these things out to a greater audience once we get more exclusive shows. So like, here's this exclusive show. If you like the whole concept of exclusive shows, then you would maybe consider liking this new thing that we're doing that is now exclusive behind the paywall. So I hear your concerns. Understand that because we have had a very slim number, I think, of exclusive shows on patreon.com/easyallies in our lifetime. Now that we are doing limited run series and specifically having them behind a paywall, we are trying different methods on specifically how to roll those things out. So as we do more exclusive limited series, you will see different ways that we try to promote them. Obviously, one of the big lessons that we took from doing spoiler mode as a Patreon exclusive and now releasing And For That Reason is awareness, is viewership. We talked about maybe just having a little promo that we could run during streams or put at the end of top 10s that are like, hey, we have exclusive shows, go check that stuff out. I don't know if specifically giving people an entire first episode for free is the thing that people are like, darn it, I didn't want to give money now, but I have to see 5 other versions of that thing that I just watched and enjoyed. I don't know if that is necessarily that much of an incentive for them. You make a case for it. I'm not saying it's guaranteed not. I'm just saying that we don't necessarily want to do the biggest thing first, the most desperate thing to try to get people involved. We want to experiment with different ways to incentivize people, obviously, in all of our different avenues, social media, YouTube, Twitch, and here, easyallies.com, and here on Patreon. And that it's just kind of one take on the issue. So your opinion is noted, and I don't know in what ways our advertising of our behind-the-scenes stuff, our Patreon exclusive stuff will change in the future, but I know that it will be different as we move forward and do more projects. Dozy_DE. Dozy D, after reaching the 50K goal and a studio only a matter of time, do you guys have any idea of a theme for the studio? Do you prefer something with a garage style like yours or Wayne World, or a cleaner, modern look? Why not both? We had a glass table at Defy. I kind of miss that glass table. Glass tables are kind of pretty. But having kind of maybe more like a poker table, you know, might be nice. Having something more that seems kind of like a gentleman's lounge. But something that seems a little cozier, I think could potentially be fun. We could all have smoking jackets and pipes. I think not only do we have to figure that out after we get a studio, a lot of that depends on what kind of studio we get. One of our studios potentially could have a built-in style. Like, we could find a space that we're like, you know what? I really like this attitude. I like the vibe that this area is giving off. So we actually don't have to do a lot of building as far as like setting up a stage. Like, we're just kind of built into this space automatically. And so I think there have been a lot of concerns from our audience about making things cozy, keeping them cozy. So I think we definitely want to keep things cozy. So Wayne's World would be funny. I'd love just like a neon sign in the background that said Easy Allies. Steve S, on the day the studio officially opens, do you think you'll get a chance to sit down in your office and reflect on the journey and struggle to get there? I will insist upon it. Is there one thing you'd want to tell yourself when you started Easy A 2 years ago? Yeah, don't freak out about changing things after the fact. Also, make sure to take a picture of the group in front of the studio building. It'll be a memory to keep forever. We definitely will. You can count on it. One final question. Then we will wrap up, and we will take care of personal questions next week. Kicking off with Cola Ina asking about Ben Moore. If you want to hear what I really have to think about Ben Moore, tune in to the next Cup of Jones. Stephen Beaumont. Did you know, no, this is a personal question. Oh well, I mentioned him anyway. Did you know that Jim Lee is doing art streams on Switch? Super chill, watching a master at work. Could be good muted when you're cutting the podcast. I did. I've never seen any of his streams, but those look extremely fun, and I would love to do that. But I have not watched any of those specifically. I've seen him. I follow him on Twitter, so I've seen him tweet a lot of that stuff out. But Jim Lee being someone who has done a lot of comic books, specifically his DC work, is what I've really enjoyed over the years. But there you go. So those are the business questions. That's where I'm going to wrap up this week's Cup of Jones. We have some stuff we're shooting later today. And of course, I got to get my mind together. I got to get pumped because tonight is Hall of Greats. I have yet to have one of my games inducted into the Hall of Greats. I'm bringing a heavy hitter tonight. I'm bringing a game that is very near and dear to my heart, that is very popular. and I'm curious to see how that holds up with the community. I'm curious to see. Brad Ellis was very confident in whatever game he's bringing tonight, so he's going to pull another Chrono Trigger or something. He's just going to throw a curveball. They're all like, "What? Oh, that's a game we all love. Oh, come on." I'm going to do a fair amount of convincing tonight. I think it's something that I am going to have to make a case, but hopefully it is something that the other allies fall for. Our takeaways, a promo for Patreon exclusive shows. That's actually come up in several later questions. Consider making the E3 HTML graphics permanent. Using this is the song you're listening to, automatic lower thirds, stuff like that. Maybe implementing that into our podcast and other stuff moving forward. And ask an ally. If we were to move into the studio, consider having a show like Cup of Jones, but you have a different ally every week, every month that comes in and answers direct questions that are posed to them. That could be fun. Again, our Q&A is this Saturday, so if you want to be a part of our Q&A, you can join that tier on patreon.com/easyallies and drop in a question. I will not be there, but several of the other allies will be there as well, so you can check that out then. There we go. Business concluded. Don't expect to hear a guaranteed, here's what we're doing now, announcement from us regarding the studio until at least July 5th, most likely July 6th, because that is when we will know definitively how those numbers are going to add up on our Patreon for the month of July. And then it is going to be a slow but hopefully informative process as we begin the journey that none of us have ever undertaken, which is building a production studio our own production studio from the ground up, finding the best location for it, moving all the equipment in there, and making the best use of that space that we possibly can. Like everything that we do at Easy Allies, we want to do the best job of that as we can, and obviously for many emotional reasons, following the closure of Game Trailers, losing an access to that studio, and then just kind of setting up here almost like I had a friend with a bad breakup, and I was like, you can come sleep on my couch for a while, and the person's like, cool, for 2.5 years, and I'm like, sure. It's something that we got to branch out. We got to make a new name for ourselves and show what we can do in a new space. Some things will change, some things will stay the same, and you'll be hearing more from us about specifically what that's going to be. But don't be nervous. Success is scary, change is scary, moving is scary, but so is Easy Allies the moment we started it, and it's turned out pretty great. There have been very pivotal moments, I think, in the evolution of this thing where it's gotten real all of a sudden. I found out we hit 50K because Amanda woke me up. I slept in for some reason, really, really tired the night before, and I could finally sleep in. She shook me awake at 10 a.m. She's like, you hit 50K, and showed me the posts and the tweets and stuff like that on her phone. And so life comes at you fast. If you I don't even know the quote. I'm going to butcher it from Ferris Bueller. But you have to take your time if you really want to do things the right way. Us with taking our times obviously means that we need to communicate with you as much as possible. And so we will try to be as transparent as possible and update you whenever we can on this interesting journey that we will have moving into a new space. But I've said it before and I will say it again. The greatest of thank yous to people that I don't want you to feel left out if you have not made any kind of financial change lately. I don't want you to feel that you're not a part of this. If you're like, well, I haven't upped my pledge in a long time, so even though we're breaking records and we're hitting new goals here on Patreon, and that's very exciting, I don't feel like I'm a part of that because I don't contribute. Even if you're like, I'm a $1 patron, or even if you're like, somehow you're watching this video and I'm not a patron, I want you to, you are involved in this because this is a big change that is happening with Easy Allies, and you were here at the time that it is happening, and so you are very much involved. Your support of us is very much instrumental in what has gotten us to this point that is occurring much faster than we ever thought it would, and we're just so happy and so thankful for everything. So a hearty love and respect to all of you for making this happen. Thank you so much for your support here on Patreon. And more news to come. Again, tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific time, twitch.tv/EasyAllies, Hall of Greats. I know you don't vote for me, but wish me luck in getting my pick in. And we will shoot the last podcast for the month. We will have our new fun podcast sponsors on the podcast next week. And I will be back next week with the bevy of personal questions. If you want to be nice to me, and I would very much appreciate it, maybe ease up on the personal questions in this episode so I don't do like an hour and 15-minute personal question segment in next week's show. But before we meet again next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Until then, cheers.